But yeah, I'll watch this. I'll watch Unc and see what Unc had to say. Speaking of Unc, what is this? That is crazy. No, that's sad to see, man. That's sad to see. That is sad to see, dude. How did that how does that happen? How does Unc get to that level? I mean, that's just like pure, unrestricted, unfiltered white supremacy. Like, that is wild to me. He's right though. Listen, we cannot have racism manifest in this community in a way like that. That's crazy. Listen, I respect old heads, okay, across the board, unconditionally. That's crazy. Not only is it racist, it's demonstrably wrong. I mean, yeah, but yeah, of course, because it's racist. The people who say he's right watch 3 NBA games a year. Dude, I don't know how you can watch 3 consecutive NBA games or 3 random NBA games in 1 year and then still arrive at that conclusion. Okay? Like, you need to watch, I would say, like 5 possessions to immediately figure out that, like, the level of skill in the NBA now is entirely different than where it was when Larry Bird was dominating. Okay? You do not have to watch an entire NBA game to immediately figure out that, like, medical science, exercise science just is so improved. What are you talking about, dude? Bro, they would have, dude. Like, Wemby in and of itself, Giannis, Wemby, look at these guys, okay? Look at these guys and then imagine them existing. Like, people are going to say, like, oh, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, right? Or any number of, like, famous big men, right? No, I'm not going to say Jokic, because Jokic is, like, actually the type of player, like Wilt Chamberlain, right? But, like, Jokic is exactly the type of player who would have played in the same exact way, I think, in the past. He's the closest to, like, old school NBA in his play style. But what I'm trying to say is that, like, you have dudes who are like 7'14", who take threes and are wet. Like, that's insane, dude. That's crazy. So false, Lamont. No center has ever passed like he does. That's true. Okay, that's fair. That's a fair assessment, and you're right, and I'm sorry about that. But like, it's just not, like, that's just crazy. That's unimaginable, dude. Yeah, the game has improved dramatically across the board, every aspect of it. And it will continue to be better. It will continue to get better, which is ironic because, like, people watch it less because everyone's always talking about how, I don't know. I feel like the new NBA drama is that, like, everyone is doing 3 points and it's not, everyone's shooting threes, and Steph Curry actually ruined the NBA because everyone wants to play like him and everyone wants to spam threes. So obviously, like, the games are no longer as entertaining because you don't get as many posters and no mid-range, like, no contested middies, all this stuff. You just, like, bring the ball up, look for open possession, boom, fire it off. Like, you spam threes. Yeah, I know, but you were incorrect about Jokic. How many sinners in the NBA back then get triple doubles a game like he can? He can dunk, shoot, pass, and make plays. Most sitters back then only just blocked and scored with him up. Yeah, no, I know. I'm saying, I was just making a joke about, like, the way Jokic plays as, like, a tall white guy who is just, like, the slowest dude on the court. It was more so an aesthetic joke, a joke about his aesthetics, like his play style and the way he. Being a basketball coach and player, this tweet sums it up nicely. Basketball has unofficially become an upper middle class and rich person sport. It costs anywhere from $30 to $100 per hour to get a kid basketball training and play on the AAU teams. Can cost anywhere from $300 to $600. That's without travel, hotels, food, gas, new shoes, etc. Today, if a kid isn't getting trained year round, they almost have no chance of making an NBA, and the average American parent doesn't have the funds or time to invest into development. Historically, players that came from low-income backgrounds is what made the NBA, because they play with a flair, passion, and hunger that typically comes from not having much. LeBron, Magic, Kareem, Wilt, Iverson, Isaiah Thomas, Shaq, KD, D Wade, D Rose. Well, I mean, was Shaq broke? I thought Shaq's dad was like a fucking. I thought he was an army brat. But yeah, this is all sports. This is why I say, like, meritocracy is kind of, even in that regard, like, meritocracy is kind of, like, falling apart. A lot of those mentioned players were college players. No, they're talking about the training. and the scouting process. This is pre-college. This person is exclusively talking about, and I know a little bit about this as well, because, you know, while I suck ass, like I, just like every other kid, you know, shot buckets in my backyard and shot and imagined myself being Kobe Bryant. You know, I'm assuming that everyone has had hoop dreams like that at a certain point if they ever played basketball. So overall, like the talent pool is, you know, it was deep, it was wide, it was diverse, because there was you know, you could scout out kids from all around the country and immediately pick them up and put them into good schools so they can train and become good college players and then inevitably get to the NBA. But nowadays, I feel like the NBA also is like turned into, you know, a league full of former players' children. A lot of the top players right now are sons of former players themselves. I mean, even Steph Curry. But yeah, today's NBA is filled with mostly players that come from upper middle class, well-to-do families or foreigners. That's why it seems to be so uncompetitive and passionless, which is why the ratings are way down. Like, as far as I understand, like even what was it? Even like LaMelo Ball, right? He has the aesthetics of someone that comes from a very different background than the background that he actually comes from. Like, he comes from a fucking rich family, right? Or even what's his face? Yeah, LaMelo is a good player. He's fun to watch. I'm just saying, like, who is like a telegenic player who's charismatic? Ja Morant is another example of this. Ja Morant got into a lot of fucking trouble for, you know, having a gun and bringing it around. Okay, but like he also comes from like a middle class background. I guess like the only old school person that doesn't come from that background that is like a superstar in the NBA is like Anthony Davis, or not Anthony Davis, Anthony Edwards. Sorry, and that's like there are still some. Jimmy Butler, yeah, and there's probably a lot more. There's probably a lot more people like that, like Giannis, for example, in the European that come from a Euro background. They actually ironically come from like poor families for the most part, and they get scouted and they like somehow make their way up the ranks. Because like Giannis literally was selling fucking watches and shit on the street. Like, he did not have a citizenship. It's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy to think that he was literally stateless, dude. It's crazy. If you're an African migrant, like the shit you have to do to be recognized as a human being worthy of getting citizenship is insane. You have to pull off like the most impressive feats. Then they'll be like, okay, we now recognize you as a full-fledged human being. That's crazy. Okay, that's crazy. Anyway, this is to say that Turkey dropped the ball big time by not immediately nationalizing Giannis when there was an opportunity there, okay, at a certain point. In my head canon, can you imagine? Instead of Giannis, his name is Yunus, which means dolphin in Turkish, okay? Yunus Antep. And he's nationalized as a Turkish citizen, and he gets the development necessary, okay? They call him Yunus Antep. Antep is Gaziantep. That's great. It works, you know? Yeah, Antepoğlu. Greek. Giannis is the GOAT. He is. He's great. I'm just saying, I fucking wish he was Turkish. Yeah, now they know him as the Greek freak. He could have been known. He is Greek. He is ours. I know, man. Y'all got lucky. That's all I'm saying. Y'all got lucky. Alperen Şengün is still putting the numbers on the board for Turkey. Anyway. JJJ. As bayrakları. As! Alperen Şengün! All right, I'm done. I'm done talking about ball. Why the fuck do I always get into these like random tangents about basketball? I don't know shit about ball, dude. I don't know anything about ball. Ball talk. Okay, I don't want to watch this. This is too sad. What is this? Me caroling outside of Hassan Doğan Piker's house? Oh my God. Dude, look at the flag. What is that flag? Hey, yo. That's crazy. That's oh, that's amazing. That's fire. Respect. New merch idea, please. Yeah, that seems great. I need to sell that. Is it Jover? What? What is this? Hey, Jace, can you send me pics of Notes I Left Behind? Sure, one sec. Whoops, wrong pic. Here you go. Wait, what? That's crazy. How does this have 23? Bro, what is going on? I'm in arcane memes? What the hell? I'm in this is deep lore, dude. This is Jaywick arcane memes. It's real, by the way. Jace Victor is real. Jvic is real. You will never convince me that it's not real. It is real. Okay? Do you think Jace is a Hasanabi head? Maybe. Yeah, Israel. Israel. The way that pig has a hold in my brain, I can't believe that has 30,000 fucking... I can't believe on Twitter it got 200K likes and 30,000 bookmarks. Oh yeah, I saw this. Speaking of ball, this is the last thing I'm going to say. Okay? Speaking of ball, what is this? The scariest pick me on TikTok? Maybe we'll look at this. Scottie Pippen posted, how many championships will we have won with Elon Musk? There is 0%. I'm giving it 0% chance that Scottie Pippen runs his account. Okay? There is no way that Scottie Pippen actually runs his account. He has probably given this account over to some fucking... Yeah, this is $ ball is innovating sports and crypto. Yeah, this is... I'm telling you right now, this account is run by some fucking cryptocurrency geeks, okay? And it has nothing to do, absolutely nothing to do with Scottie Pippen at this point. Ain't no way. Ain't no way. Ain't no fucking way, dude. Have you seen the Chubel video? No. You coming to Oxford on the 5th? Is that talk still happening? Yes. Yes, it's still happening. Why wouldn't it happen? Oh, because you think like haters are going to fucking mass spam it to be like, don't talk. This person should not be allowed to talk. Yeah, I don't think Oxford or Cambridge gives a shit about that. No, he's in the crypto shit. I know he's in the crypto shit. I'm just saying that he's probably giving off the account to someone else. Okay, let's get started with this. Let's get started with this FD Signifier Unk vid. It's got 600,000 views in 3 days. How the fuck did Trump actually win? Now, I think I'm going to have some reasonable and mild disagreements with Unk here. All right. As far as I understand, people have been trying to get me to watch this for a minute. So I'm excited to see it. Let's go. And then we'll do the drama a little bit.
All right. Not a lot of fun and games today. We're going to jump right in.
Unk is a little libbed up.
I did a live the day after the election where Donald Trump became only the second president in American history to win a non-consecutive term by convincingly beating Kamala Harris, and emotions were high, limited information was available. But based on what I had seen and what I had been hearing at that time, I made the proclamation in this live that the core reason Kamala Harris lost her bid for presidency of the United States was misogyny and racism. I base this not just on my general beliefs on the pervasiveness of sexism and racism in this country, but on the fact that at the time, the early data indicated that there was a huge decrease in voter turnout for her specifically with rural and suburban white men. Many folks, including more moderate leftists and liberals, agreed with this take, but also disagreed with the take. Others that I would call my peers politically, and some even further left than I, felt like this take was erroneous and in some ways let the Democrats off the hook for their many mistakes, during this election cycle. Or like their liberals, ironically, they didn't like the finger being pointed at white people when there's black men, Latino men, and Palestinians to take the blame. I found both of these responses frustrating as neither really aligned with how I saw the whole situation, but at the time I didn't have enough data and I hadn't talked to enough people to feel too confident in my own take. But now, some weeks later, as most of the details and info are near final, along with being able to observe and process a lot of other people's opinions in the aftermath, I want to return to this opinion with a little more data. That's what we'll be doing in this video, using a mostly data-driven approach to explain why Kamala Harris lost, or better yet, why Donald Trump won, and what lessons could and should be learned from this election. I want to first make a few things clear. Here in the swing state of Georgia where I live, I voted for Kamala Harris. I didn't do this out of an alignment to the politics that Kamala represented or ran on, especially in the latter part of her campaign. I didn't do this with the mythical hope that she would be pushed left. That just doesn't really happen. I voted for Kamala Harris because of the two devils I was faced with. I preferred her, the devil I knew. To many, that is unsatisfactory. And to those of you who feel this way, it is what it is. To me, the world is already in a hellscape situation, and I personally find no solace in the individual victory that would have been a protest or third-party vote, nor did I think that it would make a difference, and we'll look at why that's completely true later on. I am not of the mind that a Trump presidency and a Kamala Harris presidency would have been indiscernible from each other. On a grand scale, that's likely true, but at a micro level, at an interpersonal level, and at an immediate level, I think this is demonstrably false, and I don't think anyone who's serious can say that to be a fact across the board. Trump's 4 years as president before were harmful in numerous ways that were unique to him, including his handling of a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic, which was made worse by his incompetence. But I digress. I'm only bringing this up because I also don't want this video to be mistaken as a defense for Kamala Harris or the Democrats. And it's really frustrating that our political discourse on the left has been so atomized and just made into content garbage that people who take nuanced look at these complex issues end up having to be in one camp or another. Like, I'm literally in the moment have done this take like 10 times because I'm trying to find the words to say how frustrating it is to want to have a nuanced conversation around electoralism when there's people that if you don't support Kamala Harris, they don't want to hear anything you want to say, even though there's obvious reasons to not support Kamala Harris. And people that don't support Kamala Harris feel like there's no logical or moral reason to vote for her regardless, as if anything in our political reality is that black and white. But it is what it is.
Have you already forgot us, the chat, since you're already the almost mainstream monk? First of all, no. And being quote unquote almost mainstream doesn't change anything. This is where I choose to be.
I feel like it's important to continue challenging my more liberal and moderate audience to dispose of the belief that Democrats are on our side. At best, they hold us hostage and force us to be complicit in their failings and atrocities by holding the knife to our throat that is the Republican Party. But I also think the grandstanding and finger wagging, often by people who are least affected by the threat that is the Republican Party, is just as ridiculous, especially when that ideology veers into, I'll just call it magical thinking at this point. But for those who still don't understand why the Democrats are bad, I'll link some other videos that break down their failings in the description. With that out of the way, let's get to it. As of writing, with 99% of the vote in nationwide, Kamala Harris has 73,879,941 votes, and Trump has 76,528,802 votes. This ranks second and fourth all time in popular votes for a president. And this is with 90 million eligible voters deciding to stay home, which, believe it or not, is typical for non-voters. Usually voter turnout is around 60 to 65%. However, one important detail that we'll come back to a few times is that in 2020, Joe Biden set the record for popular votes with 81 million votes.
Yeah, and the reason for that obviously was because of, and this is something that like a lot of people argue for when talking about expanding access, but when you expand voting access, when you make it easier to vote, yeah, more people end up voting. That's it. It's that simple.
Important fact to point out here is that Kamala Harris got around 7 million votes less than Joe Biden did back in 2020 nationwide. Now, you might immediately look at that and say this is because Kamala ran a bad campaign and because she campaigned on the wrong things that her base and regular people did not care about. Or you may immediately look and say that Kamala is a victim of sexism and racism because the same people that voted for Biden, whose campaign was exactly like hers, did not vote for her. And I think when you're looking
Do you think Biden would have won without COVID? No. I've said that before. No, of course not. No fucking shot. And this doesn't even mean that like Donald Trump was super popular. He was not either. But the lack of examination of the way that most Americans feel about the establishment, what they think the establishment is quite literally the reason why I think the Democrats are always slated to lose. That's it. Like unless they, in my opinion, unless they change trajectory and stop being so fearful of upsetting like corporate mega donors and openly communicate their desire in an earnest way to improve people's material realities, they're just not. They're going to keep getting fucking comstered. Yeah, and it wasn't even just COVID. It was also Trump getting COVID like a week before the election, like, and reminding everybody how fucking dangerous COVID was.
At a national level, it's hard to be definitive because we're talking about all.
Why can't we pressure the AFL-CIO to start a labor third party? What are you talking about? The AFL-CIO is like basically an arm of the Democratic Party.
50 states, many with complex dynamics of how voting plays out. There's reasons to think that Kamala failed to inspire nationwide with a campaign that started late, where American people didn't get to choose her, and her campaign was not overly detailed on policy. And the stuff that was emphasized showed her to be a centrist and a moderate, which much of the base might not have been into. I would argue that much of her rhetoric at the Democratic National Convention in August was more suited for a moderate Republican than a Democrat. She talked about securing borders, having a strong military. She avoided addressing identity politics. She campaigned with Liz Cheney. One of her biggest things she would talk about was how she was supported by the Republican establishment, and most alarmingly, she refused to engage with any talk of ending the United States' role in the ongoing genocide in Palestine. In the aftermath of her loss, many pundits and insiders have came out to make accusations that her campaign wasn't very good and the groundwork strategy was flawed. Some point out that the way she got the nomination was probably—
I don't even think the groundwork strategy was flawed. I compare this to, like, I increase the speed. I compare Kamala. I can't even talk. I compare Kamala Harris's situation, her electoral strategy, her campaigning, to a person that has a massive arsenal. Okay, you can have an army, you can have all the best weapons, but if your bullets are all duds, you're not gonna succeed. That's it. Kamala Harris had a fundraising advantage. Kamala Harris had better ground game, but the message coming from the top that everyone that was door knocking was delivering was shitty and ineffective. That's it. That's it. You can have an army, you can have all the weapons, but if you're firing blanks, you're not going to win. And that is precisely what happened.
Problematic to begin with. There's a whole lot of things to criticize about Kamala's strategy before you even begin to consider how this strategy was either informed by or was structured to deal with the fact that she was a black woman. Since the election, I've talked to a lot of black women, and one thing that's been said to me multiple times is that as a black woman in these types of spaces, it doesn't matter what you say or do or what you say you're going to do, you will always be received as woke and emotional and inherently incompetent and all these things. And one could argue that the conservatism of her campaign was an effort to counteract that natural narrative, a narrative that if you look at exit polls, she definitely seemed to stick to her despite her flawed campaign. And I'm not saying that to say that her campaign was good. I'm just saying it helps explain one of the reasons why it was the way it was. However, this doesn't seem to matter when you look at the data. When you zoom in from the national level and just look at the 7 key swing states that really decided this election, you begin to really get some answers. For those unaware or outside the US, our presidential elections are some bullshit, low key. The country has 50 states, right? And each state is worth a certain amount of points. If you win that state by getting the most votes in that state, you get all 20 points. Even if you only got 51% of the vote, you still get all 20 points. What this ends up doing is making it so 5 to 10 states that are up for grabs really control the entire election. And that's because most states in America consistently vote in a very specific way. Some states like Minnesota, for example, haven't voted for a Republican for president since 1968. States like Texas, on the other hand, haven't voted for a Democrat since 1972. This means that any analysis of the election that doesn't hyper-focus on what happened in those states isn't necessarily the greatest analysis, because in those states is where
If they were going to call her woke, then why tack to the right anyway? Should have gone left. Yeah, that's the problem. It's running from a place of fear, and Democrats do it. If I'm going to be super charitable to the Democrats and not assume the position that they want to lose, that they want to be the controlled opposition, that they want to be a hurdle in the face of like real leftist movements in this country, and that they do actually want to win. And I'm certain that there are plenty of people who do want that, right? Within the ranks of the Democratic Party, they're just bad at their jobs. Then I think that they are running from a place of fear. They're always running scared. They're always terrified of their opposition. They always allow the opposition to flood the market with whatever kind of like nonsensical positions that they invent, that they concoct in a laboratory half the time at a think tank, right? And then they always run defense. And they're always running defense in territory that is more beneficial for the Republican Party. Running defense on the issue of immigration and adopting the right-wing framing on the issue of immigration, you're cooked. You're cooked. Like I've said before, it's like, you know, instead of playing one-on-one basketball with LeBron, you decide to, I don't know, play chess. Like on the one hand, you got a grandmaster in chess. On the other hand, you have the grandmaster of basketball, LeBron James. And the Republican Party being the grandmaster of chess is like, I dictate the terms. We're playing chess. We're not playing basketball. It doesn't make sense. Just fucking play basketball. Why the fuck would you play chess? You're LeBron James.
The voting population has and feels the most responsibility. This is where campaigns spend the most money, and this is where the campaign's successes or failures are really reflected, and where data and feedback is most valuable. So that's where I'm going to focus most of my analysis on. And when you focus the analysis on the 7 battleground states, you start to see some really interesting features. In 2024, there were 7 battleground states: North Carolina, Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Nevada, and Wisconsin. Kamala Harris lost all of them. However, the narrative that I presented a second ago about her flawed campaign, that voters stayed home because she ran too far to the right and didn't support Palestine, that she didn't run on any policies, etc., that doesn't really hold up here, because in 4 of the 7 swing states, Wisconsin, Georgia, North Carolina, and Nevada, Kamala Harris actually outdid Joe Biden in 2020. That's from small numbers. It's not like she outdid him by a whole lot. But considering that Joe Biden had 7 million more votes nationwide, the fact that Kamala Harris kept up with him in these 4 battleground states indicates that she wasn't doing nearly as bad as people are trying to say she was. And in the 3 states where she didn't outdo him, Michigan.
Okay, as far as especially Georgia, like, we're gonna talk about Georgia. Joseph Robinette Brandon, 2.4 million votes. Kamala Harris, 2.5 million votes. The reality of the matter is, this is because of changing demographics in the state of Georgia. Okay, a lot of this will be like actual demographic patterns shifting in the state of Georgia, population growth in general. Okay. As far as North Carolina goes, these are areas that they like very openly and very actively targeted. The problem is, none of these areas were the areas where they were supposed to. None of these areas were the areas that were supposed to fucking put up numbers. The real numbers were supposed to come from the blue wall. They're hyper focused on North Carolina, especially where she did outperform Joe Biden and still lost. You're scrambling, FD got your number? No. Hyper focusing on these other states, when your battleground states that are going to get you the victory, being the blue wall, was a mistake. Wisconsin being one of the examples. And even then, when they hyper focused on the blue wall states, okay, they did a horrible job at it. Look at this. Like, what do you mean? Like, trying to fucking tap undecideds, independents, and moderate Republicans is just like failing spectacularly to do so. Of course you were going to lose. I don't understand what FD's argument here is. Like, is he just saying that Trump is simply too popular to beat? Is he saying that? I don't fully understand what his argument is here. Like,
that she wasn't doing nearly as bad as people are trying to say she was. And in the 3 states where she didn't outdo him, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Arizona, she got within around 70,000 votes or less. So he didn't blow her out there either. Now, you may still feel that Kamala's campaign was bad because you don't like her politics or tactics on a specific personal level. And I would agree with all of those opinions. However, that doesn't mean her campaign was ineffective. The numbers say that it was. The difference is in Trump and some of the specific voter bases that he was able to pull in those same states, as well as specific voters that did not show up for Harris that showed up for Biden. While all the criticisms that you probably have of Harris and her campaign are true, I still think the results are more consistent with this country's deep-rooted misogyny and racism. I know people don't like that.
Yeah, the reason why I don't like this argument is because the solution to this argument literally is never run a black woman ever again. And I disagree with that on principle. Never run a woman of color ever again is not a good solution to this. And I do agree that, like, racism and misogyny always is going to factor into it. This is something that I talked to Estet about as well, if you recall, and something that FD also brought forward originally, which is the idea that, no matter what Kamala Harris said or did, she was going to be considered woke. She's a black woman from Oakland, okay? A black woman from California. Of course, she was too woke for a lot of people because they were not even considering anything. When you stand for nothing, seemingly, okay, people will make their minds up about what you stand for. And this is a major problem with the Democrats. They get bullied relentlessly and mercilessly. They get written out. That's the reason why, while Americans are on board with progressive policies, as long as it's a faceless, lifeless ballot initiative not attached to the Democratic Party, People vote for it overwhelmingly. But the moment that you put a Democrat on in charge of, defending said policy, people go, ugh, I don't want that. It's gross. The Democrats have a Riz problem. I think where FD loses some ground in his analysis that it wasn't an unknown. The numbers projected this months ago. We knew she was keeping up with Trump, but that wasn't enough. We knew this. Her deciding to continue this campaign is a campaign decision. Exactly. This is something that I pointed to time and time again throughout the campaign. Months leading up to the election, Kamala Harris would come out and spend like $30 million in one of these specific markets, right? And it wouldn't even fucking move. It wouldn't even move her polling in the direction that was necessary for her to secure a victory. And I kept saying, like, what are we doing? I mean, it's clear that the message is not working if you're pumping, if you're flooding the TV markets in Pennsylvania and the suburbs and whatnot. Like, it's obvious that the message is not working. You got to change the message. Central Committee says she lost the election in the industrial cities in the Rust Belt because young people and black people had low enthusiasm. We saw it coming weeks before, at least you and I did. Look at his old post. Is he saying that black people and young people hate black women? Make it make sense? No, I think he's talking about, I mean, I do think that there's definitely still a shit ton of people who were not on board with her for her being a black woman, like people that otherwise might have voted for her that stayed home because she's a black woman, for sure. I mean, it's automatically correct. But you're also, you're not wrong when you point to this. Like, there wasn't enthusiasm at the end of the day. There wasn't enough enthusiasm from a lot of working class individuals for the Democratic Party, just like there wasn't a lot of enthusiasm, in my opinion, from a lot of these blue wall states, from the normal constituencies that the Democratic Party relies on.
So let me address some of the common arguments that I've seen against this take. So one of the main things I've seen is that Kamala lost because of abstainers and third-party voters, most of which who had the genocide in Palestine as a deal breaker. All that said, very little data points to those people having a significant effect.
Yeah, they didn't. Kamala Harris lost by wider margins than like third-party votes would go in her favor. And not only that, but also third-party votes are not to be taken for granted. There's the automatic assumption. Nothing signals. Ogre says, nothing signals to people worried about the Middle East, like glazing the architect of the Iraq War while on your campaign tour. Like, this was a massively consequential decision, in my opinion. It was because you have a finite amount in your truncated campaign to basically craft a message to show America who you are and what you stand for. And that actually offers a wonderful opportunity, especially when you're Kamala Harris and you're basically a fucking blank sheet of paper, right? And instead of using that opportunity to just like fucking put forward a bold declarative agenda that is going to address a lot of the issues that people are experiencing, going along on this like, I'm right wing, I want a muscular border policy, I'm the top cop, all this shit was not great. I think they did think, well, Kamala Harris is a black woman, she's younger than Joe Biden, so a lot of the normal constituencies that go out and vote for the Democratic Party will come out and vote for her regardless. And that didn't happen. They just, many of them stayed home. And it's crazy because like a lot of people have written off Gaza, for example, from the equation, or falsely attribute just the third party momentum, which was lackluster. It was nowhere near where it was supposed to be. And say, oh, well, people went and voted for the third party, but they didn't vote for the third party by large enough margins. Clearly, Gaza's not an issue. Like, no, there's a shit ton of people who just didn't vote. There are a shit ton of people who just didn't vote because that was an issue for them. Okay? Straight up. And if the election is won in the Electoral College, there were plenty of people that if you had a different attitude on Gaza, if you had a different way to communicate, and truly show that you were going to change trajectory on Gaza in comparison to Joe Biden, who was horrifyingly unpopular on this issue. Yeah, those people could have been brought into the fold. Those people could have come out and voted for you. You cast them aside, and that's part of the reason why you lost. It's not the most consequential reason. There's no singular like silver bullet here, right? The elections are complicated. There is no one thing like, oh, if you do this and then you win. I don't agree with that. Sometimes I think even in my commentary, people hear parts of my analysis and they agree with it. So they think like, no, this is the singular policy. But whenever I talk about Gaza specifically, I'm referencing the polls that I saw leading up to the election for months. And how many people openly came out and said, like, yo, this is important to me. And it wasn't this like sectarian fight either. It wasn't this sectarian only Arabs or only Muslims care about Gaza shit either. There was a lot of people across the board that I think would have been more enthused to go out and vote for Kamala Harris, at least according to the polls that showed that she would get at least like a 2-point boost in 7 of the swing states, that the 7 of the battleground states. Yeah, this is a Hasanabi head who made this. Here are the 34 polls that show a ceasefire and weapons embargo help Kamala win. Michigan is the blue wall state that swung the most against Harris in this election. It's very clear it had an effect. This is quite frankly an attempt by left liberal progressives that told you to just vote for Harris for harm reduction, trying to pretend that it wasn't a bad strategy to win. If Harris had separated herself from Biden on Gaza and other issues, she would have been more likely to win. I agree. I think she always had a tough road ahead. She had a truncated campaign. She was attached to the hip to a historically unpopular incumbent. You are not going to fucking win an election like that. It's very difficult. It's an uphill battle no matter what. She's running for president in a country that is historically misogynistic and racist, running against a guy who is also misogynistic and racist himself. So all of these are issues. But just like when I tell a short man or an incel that they need to swing they need to recognize the issues that they have in the dating marketplace and work against those weaknesses, the structural hurdles that are placed upon them. I'm telling the Kamala Harris campaign this entire time, these are the realities that you are aware of. Work against them. Okay? Just be taller or you're an incel? No. The dichotomy is short king or a manlet. You never want to be a manlet. You always want to be a short king. There are plenty of short kings out there. The difference is confidence. The difference is the way you carry yourself. I love my short kings. You know this. As a tall lit, I am an advocate for the taller side, okay? People like me have had it far too good for far too long. All right? I'm a class trader for the talls, against the talls. The Taliban? I'm a height trader. Yep, I am. But yeah, when you don't have a lot of leeway and you know that the deck is stacked against you, you can't be making mistakes. And their whole campaign was a fucking mistake.
Prominent third-party candidate left to Kamala who did not support the genocide was Jill Stein. And in no swing state did Stein get even a full 1% of the vote. In Wisconsin and Georgia, she didn't even come in third. I know some truly principled leftists actually voted for Donald Trump in protests, which, okay. But I seriously doubt that that was enough to really make the difference here to put the loss on Stein and protest voters. You could argue that more principled anti-genocide voters just stayed home, but that would clash with the aforementioned fact that turnout was up in swing states. Stein did her best in Michigan, where there is a large Muslim population, where there was also a well-organized effort against the Harris campaign because of her response to the genocide. But even in Michigan, if you add all of Stein's votes to Kamala's, she would still lose. This is important to point out for a few reasons, but for the moment, I really wanted to sink in with liberals and moderates who have went full mask off online with their vitriol towards the people of Palestine and the anti-genocide movement. In the days and weeks after the election, many on social media pointed at Palestinians and their supporters as the cause of Harris's loss, and it was gross and abhorrent to witness. People posted videos of them going to Starbucks, which, by the way, Starbucks was never actually involved in any boycott related to Palestine. That's just a significant marker of how uninformed a lot of us are online, myself included. But regardless of whether or not Starbucks was a part of the anti-Palestine movement, the fact that people were going there explicitly to spite Palestinians, that shit is whack. That shit is fucked up. All you should be ashamed of yourselves. People argued, well, these folks are just angry and they should be allowed to vent their anger and express their emotions without being judged. And sure, maybe, but in that regard, where is that same empathy for Palestinians who are actively being bombed right now? Of all the things that came out of the election, this was the most disappointing to me because I genuinely expected better. And in some situations, I don't know why I did. But I'll come back to this. Another thing that people point out is that certain progressive ballot measures won in states that Kamala lost. For example, in Arizona and Nevada, they established a state right to abortion. This even won in the deep red state of Missouri. And in these particular situations, progressive ballot measures won big time, sometimes getting more votes than Trump and Harris in a particular state. So this would be a good argument against the misogyny and racism issue if you don't actually understand the difference between progressive politics and progressive policies. Many people will point out that progressive policies like universal health care, gun control, abortion, all tend to be popular issues that most of the nation agrees upon. The problem there is how these issues are seen if they're connected to or in any way can be seen as supporting of
Yeah, this is my, you know, this is a certified Hasanabi take as well. Okay. I always say this: progressive policy is popular, but unfortunately, people who, you know, carry themselves as progressive politicians are not as popular as the policies themselves.
Black people, people who are seen as undeserving. Whenever an issue is connected to black people in this country, white people will vote against that issue essentially out of spite. Right now, they're trying to repeal the Affordable Care Act, which is known to white people, a specific type of white people, as Obamacare. These are people that will literally lose their health care if Obamacare is repealed, but because it has the name Obama on it, they do not care, or they don't care enough to actually know what will happen to them. And we've seen this historically in America. The easiest example comes from the history of programs such as the New Deal or the GI Bill. Both of these programs provided massive subsidies, social welfare, and handouts to predominantly white people across the country, enabling the largest growth of the middle class in modern history, but only for white people, as both of these programs were greatly impossible to access for African Americans. And when people started even hinting at the idea that African Americans should start to benefit from these programs, public opinion on these programs changed. People started looking at them as welfare and handouts to the undeserving. And all of these programs saw drastic cuts in subsequent years. White Americans were fine with cutting off their own well-being if it meant that black Americans were cut off too. There's an old saying that a white man will shit in his own pants just to make a black man smell it. Moving on. Are Democrats, but those states did not go for Kamala Harris. How can you call it racism and sexism when other black women and other Democrats were supported in situations where Kamala was not? Again, this sounds like a sound argument until you go back to look at the data of what actually happened. The first one is easy. Ilhan Omar is a House representative from Minnesota's 5th District, a deep blue district in a state that, again,
everybody calm down, okay? Yeah, it's Ilhan, but it's fine.
Hasn't voted for a Republican for president since 1968, meaning that Kamala still won it in 2024. You can't compare Ilhan to Kamala because once Ilhan Omar won her primary, her re-election was basically a formality. There was already a world of support for her against any Republican opponent. She won with less than 300,000 votes. There's no comparing these two races on scale alone, let alone the fact that that was an easy mode win for both of them. The same can be said for the black women that ran as Democrats in Delaware and Maryland. In any situation where you're in a deep blue state, just like I explained with the Electoral College a second ago, you pretty much know who's always going to be in power in that state based off that population. Of black people elected as senators in the United States historically, the only Democrat to win in a non-deep blue state is Raphael Warnock here in Georgia. And that's partially because he's here in Georgia, where things are changing here. The rest are either black Republicans or winning in states like Illinois, New Jersey, California, etc. And again, neither of these black women, Lisa Blunt Rochester in Maryland or Angela Alsor Brooks in Delaware, won their seats in non-deep blue states. Not to take anything away from those sisters, it's just not the same level of difficulty or scrutiny that Harris faced as president. So what about Tommy Baldwin in Wisconsin or Jackie Rosa in Nevada, two swing states that were victories for Democrats? Surely this indicates something uniquely bad about Kamala and her campaign strategy. But again, not from the data, from the way I see it. In both of those states, Kamala Harris got more votes than the senatorial candidates. She even got more votes in Michigan than Erica Slotson, who won a Senate seat there, where she had the most resistance from the left and from Muslim protesters. She did get literally a few hundred votes less than Tommy Baldwin in Wisconsin, and it does look like she won't get more votes than Ruben Gallo in Arizona, who seems like he's going to win that seat. And she also didn't beat the incumbent Democratic governor of North Carolina, but there's some very significant reasons why that was always going to be a blowout.
Yeah, no, that was... I don't think you can make analysis off of like gubernatorial races, even if they're on the same ballot. You know, I've described this many times over. It's like, not only was Mark Robinson fucking insane, but I would go so far as say the Mark Robinson election is similar to the Gallego one. You know what I mean? Where it's like these people were placed against like really uniquely bad and uniquely weak candidates that were riddled with scandal, and they didn't have the same level of like rizz or national prominence that Donald Trump had. Like their opposition didn't. And I think despite that, you still can't look at a gubernatorial race regardless. Plenty of examples of right-wing states, deep right states with blue governors, and plenty of deep blue states with right-wing governors. Like, look at Vermont, look at Kentucky, right? Vermont is a right-wing governor, despite being a deep blue state, and Kentucky has a liberal governor, despite being a deep red state. So people, I think, have a very different approach to their governor. They see it as like they don't care about like party loyalty as much. It's not uncommon to have that happen.
beat the incumbent Democratic governor of North Carolina, but there's some very significant reasons why that was always going to be a blowout win for the Dems there. But overall, in these other high-stakes elections, it doesn't point to a unique rejection of Kamala by her voter base for any reason that would align with some of the criticism I mentioned earlier. In fact, almost all of those candidates ran with the same type of policies that Kamala did. Overall, she did great in the swing states, and had she just won the states where she did outdo Joe Biden, she would be the president right now. But she didn't, because Donald Trump significantly outdid his own performance from 4 years ago. And once we get into those numbers, it forces us to face some really hard realities. So let's return to those Senate races in Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada, and Arizona, and especially Pennsylvania, because they also tell us some other things once you look at the numbers. The voter results in these races, to me, point to the most important detail about what really happened in this election. Again, Kamala lost all of these states, but outside of Pennsylvania and Arizona, she outdid Biden's performance. Further, Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada, and Arizona were Senate wins for Democrats. This means that not only did Trump win these states, not only did he outdo Biden's numbers in most of them in 2020, but he also outdid his own Republican running mates in these same states, because Trump would win the state, but Democrats would win the Senate. And the gaps here are pretty significant margins. As of writing, in Wisconsin, Trump got 1,697,769 votes and won the state. The Republican senatorial candidate got 1,641,181 votes, a significant but not so wide margin akin to how Kamala did in similar situations. In Michigan, Trump got 2,814,316 votes. The Republican candidate got 2,691,621 votes, a pretty significant gap. In Arizona, Trump got 1,764,862 votes. The Republican candidate got 1,591,318.
Yeah, Sean the Black says, so if Trump captured non-voters while Kamala didn't, it's not a campaign issue. That's what I'm saying. If you draw turnout from low and mid propensity voters and that secures you an electoral W, then yeah, it's a campaign failure. It's a communications failure. It is an ideological failure from the tippy top of the Democratic establishment. The very fact that there was even any sort of question that Donald Trump could potentially win the popular vote, and I kept repeating this over and over again throughout the campaign, and everyone was like, I don't know about that, man. That's crazy. Like, that, to me, spells chaos for the future of the Democratic Party at a time when the Republican Party should be in a state of disarray.
Votes, again, another significant gap. In Nevada, Trump got 751,205 votes. The Republican candidate there got 677,046 votes, a significant gap considering the size of the state. And in Pennsylvania, the one place where a Republican actually won their race on a split ticket, Trump got 3,538,989 votes, and the Republican senatorial candidate got 3,395,274 votes. Again, a large gap in a state where the Republican actually won. This pattern is replete nationwide with Trump in solid red states. There were millions of people nationwide that went into a voting booth on election day with no interest in voting for any other candidate on their ballot other than Donald Trump. They checked one box and then turned their ballot in. Now, this isn't something that never happens. Federal elections always have higher turnout, but it's significant to see the scale at which the nation, or more explicitly, people in these swing states, showed up for the old racist, adulterous, treasonous, rapist felon, as opposed to the black woman district attorney who branded herself as a cop. So who are these people? You already fucking know. Like, why? Well, I shouldn't have to make this fucking video. The data I've seen indicates that there are white men in the suburbs and rural areas. I even had Nicholas Nameless help me out by doing a spreadsheet of all the counties in these swing states just to make sure this was true. NBC's exit polls also show that among white voters in key states, Kamala lost marginally suburban voters and significantly rural voters. These are almost categorically white voters, which correlates to her vote numbers amongst whites. In those key battleground states, she only got 37% of white men and 45% of white women. When you look at the proportion of the vote she got in those areas compared to Biden, they shrink in almost every situation, which meant that Trump got to run up the score, which meant that even though she got close in many of those states, she could.
Yeah. So this is where we both agree with one another, but I guess maybe disagree with the solution here. Cause like we agree that yes, white men, not exactly the best politics, right? Especially if their educational attainment is is at a high school level, right? The reality of the matter is that's the board. That's the game. You can't change the rules of the game midway through. You just that's it. A Democrat, a liberal, and not saying FD is one, but a liberal looks at that and goes, we got to be more racist. I look at that and go, we got to offer them shit. Okay? One side is at least recognizing the anger and frustration that they have and constantly pulling on it and saying, you're mad because black people have a seat at the table. You're mad because trans people exist. You're mad because the Democrats only care about these people. Okay? And the Democrats look to that and turn around and say, yeah, they're kind of right, actually. Oopsie, we got caught. we do care a lot about trans people, but no, we don't anymore. I promise. Okay? I promise we don't care about these people any longer. And it's like, that doesn't change anything. The Republicans already dominate that space. They already have captured their attention. They've already fucking used their anger and weaponized it against minorities. That's why they keep winning over these people. What you're supposed to do is go, nah, that's a distraction. Here's what your real problems are. I'm gonna fucking fix that shit. You know, you can't validate the right-wing position that comes from a place of anger and resentment and frustration and is used as a mechanism of distraction and deflection while they still rob you blind, while they still pick your pockets.
Couldn't get over the hump. There's so much talk about, you know, how Trump gained with Latino voters, including Latino men. And there was a ton still of stupid and erroneous talk about Kamala losing black men, which is frustrating because I've been saying how that's bullshit for years now. And anyone who understands politics knows that that wasn't going to happen. If there's one silver lining to the failure of this election, is that it might finally put to rest that talking point among a lot of people, specifically black women. In an interesting turn of events, Asian women actually voted more for Trump than Kamala, which is not true for Asian men. I'll let you come up with your own conclusions there, or maybe don't bother. Don't bother to even bother the Asian women or the Latino men or the black men. Do not waste your time. Because at the end of the day, white people make up 75% of America's electorate. And no Democratic candidate has won the white vote since Lyndon B. Johnson in 1968. The Democratic presidents that have won since then have won with a strong showing amongst whites and an even stronger showing amongst minorities. That is how they win the election. It's never the will of the white people of this country to allow a Democrat to be president, not in the last almost 60 years. I don't understand how what I'm saying here is controversial. If you are...
It's not. I mean, he's right. That's why I think Kamala Harris was wrong. I think the reason why I think Kamala Harris was wrong was because she weirdly enough thought like she could, you know, capture the attention of the white vote for some fucking odd reason and did that by parading the fucking Cheneys around when white people don't fuck with the Cheneys either. They don't fuck with the Cheneys. They hate Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney's approval ratings were fucking dog shit by the time he got out of office. They remember him as the architect of the Iraq War, understandably, because he was. Americans have moved on. They hate the Iraq War. They think it sucks. Donald Trump won, presenting himself as anti-Iraq War and portraying Hillary Clinton as a pro-war candidate in 2016.
Trying to understand the political reality of the United States of America, then all you're really doing is trying to understand the politics of what motivates white people to vote and be politically active. And I can only guess as to why a large portion of 76 million people who are white voted for Donald Trump. But more significantly, why in those swing states that won him the election, where he got more votes than his Republican counterparts by a wide margin from people who are not politically engaged, I can only assume that they felt something specific for Donald Trump that they didn't feel for Kamala Harris. And considering that this is a president who accused Haitian immigrants of eating people's pets and is threatening to use the American military on American soil to contribute to mass deportation, I don't know what motivated the motherfuckers at all. You tell me. If you can't tell, I'm really frustrated with how people are so dismissive of the role that racism and misogyny played here. Trump made incremental gains with almost every minority category.
I think this is the reason why people are dismissive of racism as well. He's not wrong. Of course, racism played a role. Like, of course, that's the only thing they have. But my point is, if the Democrats don't actually present an argument that the Republicans have to oppose, then they're going to run the table with racism. They're going to hit that vein over and over again. That's their one. They're going to keep spamming. Okay. They're going to keep spamming racism. You have to give them something to fight against. And the Democrats and their refusal to give the Republicans something to fight against is part of the reason why the racism button works so well. Is part of the reason why the trans shit even is like somewhat effective, even though it's not, right? Like it's not a thing that was a demonstrable success in the election, but a lot of Democrats seem to think so because they're like, oh, they made us look silly. They made us look bad. They made us look terrible. They made us look like we only care about the one policy that we care about is like doing bottom surgery on undocumented migrants or whatever the fuck. And it's like, that would never be a point of contention if you had a bold declarative agenda that is something that the Republicans have to present themselves as against.
I want to point that out, right? Black men, black women, Latinos, Asians, and so many other folks, small gains for Trump. That probably is significant in terms of the margins for which he won. But for the most part, in those swing states where Kamala did nearly as well or better than Biden, the big change here is that her voter base in suburban and rural areas actually drops compared to Biden. The percentage difference between Trump versus Biden and Trump versus Harris in rural and suburban counties widens. Harris only doesn't get blown out because she was able to turn out large numbers of voters in urban areas, aka black people and white liberals, the same voter base that many on the left are accusing of her not inspiring. Now, of course, I would argue that those voters are probably more inspired to vote against Trump than to vote for Kamala. I know that's what it was like with Biden. But again, we're talking about the difference between a bad campaign and an effective one. And the only difference between her and Biden on paper is her skin color and her sex organs. Is there a version of Kamala's campaign where she ran as a change candidate, promised?
I don't even fully agree with this. Like, she had benefits on that front too. She was younger than Biden. So I think, like, while yes, her being a black woman as opposed to Biden being a white man was definitely consequential, but her being younger and more vibrant and able to communicate was a benefit. Also, Biden would have lost harder than Kamala Harris. It doesn't matter as much. No, with Biden, it did. It became the only thing that mattered, I think.
Universal health care and to save the environment and give stimulus packages to workers that wins her the election? Maybe. I doubt it, but maybe. But when you look at the exit poll data, 92% of voters that voted for Trump said Kamala was too extreme as a leftist. They called her a communist even as she ran a center-right campaign.
It's because, once again, if you have no North Star that you can point to in terms of easily identifiable policies, okay, bold, universal policies, then you can be made a mockery. You can turn into a clown by your opposition. This is a major problem with the Democratic Party's attitude whenever they run scared. That's it. That's it. Oh, Kamala Harris is a communist. She's too fucking radical or whatever. Okay. Missouri voted to increase minimum wage by to $15 an hour and emergency leave or paid family leave. Missouri also voted to enshrine abortion protections in their state constitution. And then they went and voted for Donald Trump. How the fuck does that work? How does that work? The notion that like America is like unimaginably conservative is silly. It's just they hate the Democratic Party because the Democratic Party are not good at associating themselves with specific policies that are popular. They're too afraid of saying this is what we stand for. Okay? Universality works. One of Kamala Harris's most successful policies was one that she kind of dropped after the Tony West change in the campaign, and Mark Cuban started showing his fucking ugly ass face around the campaign over and over again, talking about how great it is that Kamala Harris is going to be great for the fucking billionaires and whatever, and great for the economy. And that was price gougers. She said she's going to go after price gougers. That shit was sitting at 83%. When it first got unveiled, it was at like 79% approval rating. And after a month of attacks from the Republican Party saying it's Venezuela, saying it's bad, that shit was sitting at 83%. And the Democrats were like, never mind. We're just not going to touch this, actually. This is terrible. This is too good for us. We shouldn't keep pushing that. How do you make this? How do you look at this and go, yeah, this wasn't the mistake of the Democratic Party? You know?
I said earlier about people not actually believing the things that black women say or do, only attributing them a set of woke features. No one in this election ran on policies. Trump said on the debate stage when they asked him about repealing Obamacare, which some Trump voters didn't even know was the same thing as the Affordable Care Act, that he had thoughts of a plan. He doesn't, of course. No Republicans have a plan to replace Obamacare, but they know that talking about replacing Obamacare gets those people in their base to vote. What are they voting for?
There's truth to this for sure. Republicans don't know what the fuck they're voting for. They literally, when the impact of the legislative agenda is brought forward to them, they just don't believe it. They're like, nah, that's not what I'm voting for. Yeah. The thing is, I think this race kind of showed that yes, Americans are definitely racist. They're bigoted. They're misogynistic, right? But like, Americans are suffering. They're experiencing economic hardships, and if you present whatever you want as a solution to said economic hardship, they'll be on board. Now, if there's already an underlying there's already a resilient underlying white supremacist attitude. Republicans can look to that and go, yeah, you're suffering economic hardships. Oh, housing market is fucked up. Don't worry, we're going to deport 20 million migrants. It's going to fix it. Oh, the cost of groceries is too high. We're going to deport 20 million migrants. It's going to fix it. Nobody even asked the second question of like how that's going to actually solve the problem, but it doesn't even matter. They just say we're going to deport 20 million migrants and it's going to fix it. They attach right-wing, white nativist, anti-immigrant policies and the fear of the other to the economic problems that people are facing. If the Democrats turn around and have no answer for that, if they don't run around and say, hey, listen, this deportation shit is actually ass. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? These are your neighbors. We're going to humanize them and actively campaign year round, okay, against this very obvious thing that the Republicans are going to spam over and over again. It's not like they didn't communicate that they were anti-migrant and Democrats got caught with their pants down. They knew that this is the one thing that they're going to constantly hit on because they never stopped hitting on it. If the Democrats had actually said like, no, we see you, we hear you, prices are fucked up, we're going to fix it. We're going to fix it by going after price gougers. We're going to use the federal regulatory bodies to go after fucking price gougers, to go after corporations and the billionaires and the wealthy that have fucked you over time and time again. I think that message would resonate with voters. Okay? It has resonated with voters. That's part of the reason why a lot of these cynical assholes in the Republican Party are now shifting in the direction of slight populism. Okay? They do that fake kind of left-wing populism, but in reality, they don't give a shit. Kamala Harris was like, no, this is the opportunity economy. We're going to give startups $50,000 in tax cuts. It's like, I felt like I was losing my mind.
It's not policies. In some blind surveys on policies, when people got the issues based solely on what the person was going to do, these studies found that people prefer Harris's policies over Trump's almost categorically. Again, you can't tell me that Trump voters were inspired by his policies compared to Kamala's. There's no evidence that points to that. Harris did not run on some serious woke agenda. She didn't talk about race or gender hardly at all. She ducked the conversation around trans people, talked about strong borders, didn't mention the police violence or racism basically at all. She approved fracking, yet liberal pundits are trying to say she was too left and too woke anyway. So God forbid she may have actually ran a populist campaign on change like Bernie did and talk about those things that are important to her base, because she probably would have gotten even worse. But if she were Bernie, if she were a heterosexual white man, I'm confident she'd have won with exactly the same campaign strategy of not really saying much, because again, that's what Biden did in 2020.
No, I don't agree, because Biden would have fucking lost by wider margins to Donald Trump. That's why he had to drop out. So this is where I actually disagree with FD Signifier vehemently, because there's a reason why Biden had to drop out, right? This election cycle. We're not even talking about 2020, because in 2020 he won. I mean, it's a bubble ring, okay? I'm sorry. No disrespect to my GOAT, LaGod James, but like it was the COVID bubble, okay? It was a Mickey Mouse ring for Joe Biden. Like straight up. It was a Mickey Mouse ring. It was a bubble ring. You know, he did not have numbers on the board like LaGoat did, okay? LaGoat, it doesn't matter. He would have won it nonetheless. Yeah. The internal polling was looking like Biden was going to lose New York, okay? It's not even a thing. Like, it's not even, I mean, this doesn't make any sense.
I want to be clear. I'm not saying that racism and misogyny are the only reason she lost. When you look at the info that we have, you recognize that she lost white voters, that many white voters stayed home, and that she did well in swing states despite not having policies, and that hundreds of thousands of voters showed up in swing states explicitly to vote for Donald Trump, who also didn't have policies. She even won independents. I was surprised at that. That was something that was not true early on in the election data, but in the aftermath of the election, she won independent voters. But those people that wanted what Donald Trump was selling, they came through for him, and they didn't come through for Kamala. I'm a researcher by trade. I'm not a quantitative guy. I didn't do the most rigorous analysis here. I didn't run any regression tables. I welcome those of you who have that skill set to come and look at what I've looked at and come to your own conclusion. I hope that I'm wrong, to be honest. I wish we lived in a world where American voters cared so much about Palestine that they stayed home. I wish we had a voting population in this country that cared so much about policy details that they weren't inspired to vote for a candidate who provided none. But nothing in the data points to this. And I think we on the left need to get that through our skulls. Considering everything I've shown you here, I'm genuinely asking you in the comments, please, for my own sake, for everyone's sake, find a better explanation than racism and misogyny that actually makes sense. I'm begging you to prove me wrong with something more than willful ignorance and vibes, because the data points.
I mean, it's dog shit policies. Like, I think Kamala Harris is not a particularly charismatic individual, and I think on top of You either have to have like, you know, ultra instinct charisma to make it work and to be able to like make shitty third way neoliberalism come across sexy, which is very difficult to begin with. Or you have to be like Bernie Sanders is not a particularly charismatic individual at all, but he's earnest. He's able to communicate honesty, right? And on top of that, he has great policies, popular policies. Kamala Harris had neither. She was not particularly charismatic. And on top of that, she was running the most dog shit way neoliberalism agenda. Nah, Bernie is super charismatic. Is the accent? Yeah, okay, you're out of your mind. Also can't compare Trump not having real policies to Harris having half-ass policies. Progressives don't come out of half-ass policies or no policies. No. Donald Trump did come out with bullshit policies. But the problem is he at least pointed to the issues over and over again. He hammered it over and over again. The issues that people were experiencing. He was able to deflect the attention, divert the attention, but he was able to basically channel the anger that people were feeling, channel the frustrations that people were feeling. And he would just go, you're angry, you're right to be angry. You know why you should be angry? Immigrants. What is this? One Dime had a take on this. The idea that policy and economic conditions played zero role in Trump's victory and that Kamala Harris lost mainly because of racism and sexism is such cope is a narrative that neither is accurate or productive. It's very one-dimensional narrative that implicitly makes people so nihilistic that they abandon the working class because they're supposedly too white and reactionary. I agree. That's the other aspect of this, because you're not going to ever win. It almost loops around back to the Democratic Party's position, which is that like we're not woke. We're too woke. The Democrats are too woke to win elections, right? I don't think. By the way, this isn't FD Signifier's position. FD Signifier does not say that like it played zero role at all. But I think ultimately I look to the game, I look to the election, I look to the way that Donald Trump won and how he won, and I see two options here. Either the American whites are just far too gone and impossible to fucking convince, and they're intrinsically evil and white supremacist, right? And it's impossible to ever convince them to vote for the Democratic Party unless you also become like evil and white supremacist to a certain degree, which is, of course, been a demonstrable failure, right? Or you have to try something different. Try something that the Democrats haven't really done, which is go out and push for bold, universal policies that help, universal policies that help everybody, including the white working class. Recognize the anxieties that they feel and try to desperately claw them back from the grips of white supremacist thinking.
Thanks to Trump uniquely motivating a specific type of voter that shows up only for him, only for his unique brand of racist, sexist, authoritarian posturing. He gets rural America voting in a way they traditionally do not. Trump could have...
Yeah, I mean, AMLO and Claudio Sheinbaum is right there. Mexican society is not more progressive across the board than America, right? They're not. Mexico has real problems with femicide. This is a real issue. And yet they voted for a Jewish woman in a 98% Catholic nation by wider margins that they'd voted for the old white guy that came before her. And there's a reason for that. And that is because AMLO expanded social safety nets, expanded the welfare state, and also very openly communicated that he was doing that over and over again. He was not afraid of calling out his enemies, right? And it's not like he was a what do you call it? Particularly woke, or it's not like he was like a fucking card carrying socialist either, right? He's not. But it didn't matter. You improve people's material conditions and they will never forget it.
Actually beating Obama in 2008. There's people like memeing like Obama's gonna come back in 2028 or whatever because Trump's gonna try to run for a third term. He's going to beat Obama too if we don't fix the actual core issue that this country's dealing with. So I'm sorry if I'm heated and I'm coming off like hot to anyone, but to me it's absurd that we're tossing out this explanation when it's the only one that actually tells us where we are as a country. There's a video from Innuendo Studios I like to talk about in these situations called There's Always a Bigger Fish, and it's to me one of the more important political videos on this platform if you want to understand what motivates the conservative mind. In this video, he argues that the embarrassed millionaire thing is inaccurate. I know a lot of people are saying conservatives vote for Republicans because they think they're going to be rich. And there's all these people that are like, Trump represents the lifestyle and ideology that I want to have, even though I work at Foot Locker and make less than $30,000 a year. He makes an argument that that's not really what it is. He argues instead that conservatives fight for power for other conservatives, not because they think that they'll be powerful one day, but because they feel like the people who have that power are supposed to have it. And they feel like people who naturally don't have power should never have it because they haven't earned it. And somehow those who do have power did earn it. And this is why Trump can get away with saying that he started from a small loan of $1 million and had so many conservatives be okay with that. And this is what Trump presents to the world, this populist strongman figure that puts everyone in their place and cannot be controlled or held accountable in any way. This is why he had to say the previous election was stolen. And even as he faced charges and was convicted on some of these charges, it doesn't make a difference. It's why his assassination attempt was a huge deal for him. And the media and everyone else just keeps letting him get away with it. No matter how dumb he looks, no matter how little some of the things he says make sense, it doesn't matter because he's Donald Trump and he can get away with it. But you know who doesn't get away with anything in America ever? Black people, especially black women. No group is more required to know their place and know their lack of worth in this country than black women. The double standards for women become quadruple standards for black women. Beyonce didn't even get nominated for a country music award. What the hell made you think that we were going to elect a black woman as president of the whole country, even in 2024? I'm sure you can pull out some surveys that say more left-leaning people would have voted for her if she endorsed a ceasefire or ran a more left-wing campaign. And of course, her decision to campaign with Liz Cheney and all the other.
I don't even personally think that like it's about left-wing candidates or left-wing voters. Like this is also in part our failure to communicate on the left. Like I don't think Tim Walz is a socialist champion. Okay? I think that Tim Walz did a really good job in Minnesota by utilizing the one seat majority that they had in the state Senate to push for a lot of legislative changes in the state that impacted people's lives in a positive way, right? These policies might have been portrayed as radical, but it didn't matter because Republicans want to feed children too. Like they also benefit from these policies and they start recognizing that these policies are good. So I think like the left right dynamic here, or the woke, not woke dynamic, or progressive dynamic is not completely accurate. These are policies that are beneficial for every American, you know? That's it. It doesn't matter. Even if you don't vote for the Democratic Party, I think ultimately the goal should be to improve everyone's lives. If he's conceding that she never could have won, why isn't he way more pissed that she was a candidate to begin with? I think there's like somewhat of a stink associated with progressivism. That's the other side of this. Like a lot of people consider it to be a lot of people consider it to be like a electoral anvil on people's necks, because most people don't understand it. They think it's like tied to liberalism, and people fucking hate liberalism, even if they are themselves liberal. Like Republicans, they love liberalism. They do it all the goddamn time. It's monoculture. They just do it with a reactionary slant, a more reactionary slant than the Democratic Party's voters.
The bullshit wasn't good. And I want to again be clear. Kamala wasn't that great of a candidate to begin with. In 2020, she was the first candidate to drop out. Do y'all remember that? For 4 years as vice president, she didn't do much to impress or inspire. And if the Democrats had a primary this time around, she probably would have lost to Amy Klobuchar or her own running mate, Tim Walz, or likely the next Democratic winner, if you want to put money on it, the American Psycho himself, Gavin Newsom. All of this is true.
I think Gavin Newsom gets cumstered. I mean, it entirely depends. I think if the Democratic Party still go for like a Pete Buttigieg or a Gavin Newsom or a Josh Shapiro, especially Gavin Newsom, oh my God. I think if they do any of these guys, okay, but especially Gavin Newsom with that California stink on him too, unless the Republican Party has a direct line of lineage, like a successor that they somehow develop. And I don't know if that's JD Vance, honestly, because he's patently unlikable. I don't know. Like the Republican, make no mistake, there is a holistic problem with the Republican Party as well. They're relying on Donald Trump's telegenic riz far too much. They tried to They tried to put an establishment figure that represented Trumpian politics and failed spectacularly. Ron DeSantis, right? They are kind of in their Obama era right now. In the same way that the Democratic Party was in its Obama wave from 2008 onward, and we're never really able to recreate that same charisma. And that's part of the reason why they keep losing. I think the Republican Party is going to experience a similar problem unless they find like a way out of this. I've said this a million times. Donald Trump is Obama for white people, like a specific kind of white person, if you know what I mean.
But that's not what happened. What happened is she ran and she almost won 4 swing states, and she lost because Trump brought out his squad. And his squad are rural Americans greatly unified behind some very, very specific interests. The reason I bothered to do this work is because I really need those to the right of me to stop blaming the far left for this loss. The numbers show we didn't do much. You're showing your own true colors with the way you're responding to this loss. You're proving everything we say about you to be true by pointing the finger at Palestinians, Latinos, and black men instead of some of your own cousins and husbands who have the real.
What is going on in this screen here, bro? Academics crashes out on Kendrick Lamar on stream. What is this chaotic ass first picture here? Kamala Harris, Kendrick Lamar, Donald Trump, me in a dress, Destiny. What the fuck is this? What the fuck's this man looking at? Is this his goon folder? Why does he look like he's gooning too? He's like, oops, my goon folder leaked.
Real impact here. We barely had any impact at all. I also need those to my left to get a reality check because we barely had any impact at all. We are much further from our goals than many online like to believe. I'd argue that much of our behavior online, from the infighting to the purity testing to the constant engagement with rage bait, is a core reason why we're not nearly as far along as we think we are. We're chasing the feeling of winning something, anything, and getting it with mean tweets and comments while nothing is actually getting done outside of our screens. This isn't everyone to my left. You know who you are, but it's some of you, and you know who you are too. This election's results are beholding to the same massive forces that American politics have always been beholding to. White supremacist patriarchy in its varied and most subtle forms. Again, if you don't see the role that racism and misogyny played in this situation, I invite you to present your best argument in the comments. But then after that, tell me what you're doing next. One of the reasons I voted for Kamala is because I wanted to avoid making a video like this, because I knew as soon as she started losing that I was probably going to have to make something like this. Because while Kamala represents a horrible status quo that I've been talking about from jump, and be clear where I stand, to me, there's value in not resetting the meta of what resistance looks like to the institutions that both Trump and Harris really work for. I might be wrong about this. This is not a hill I'll die on. In fact, if you look at like the person that Trump disappointed as his borders are, that same guy that people are crying about worked for Barack Obama. Like, people that say that you can't compare the two, you're lying to yourselves. But anyway, in the aftermath of this election, the whole game has been reset. We're putting effort into settling down foaming at the mouth liberals who are going full mask off with Zionism, imperialism. We're also dealing with charged up conservatives preparing for the Christo-fascist regime that Trump is trying to put in place. Resources that may have went to further resistance for Palestine are going to be used to fight under the Muslim ban here in the United States. Bad immigrant policy that we already had is going to be leveled up to militarized mass deportation. And this isn't even getting into the drastic changes that will likely face LGBTQ people and especially trans people going forward. And I'm not saying all this to prepare for a future I told you so, because at the end of the day, Kamala and the Democratic Party deserve exactly what they get. They are bad for all the reasons we know them to be bad. And all the things we're complaining about are exactly why they're bad. So they deserve it, but we don't. So what are you going to do about it? After you leave your comment of approval or your comment of disapproval, what are you going to do next? What meeting do you have on your calendar? Have you reached out to your neighbors to see who you could coalition build with? Are you capable of protecting yourself or others?
I've been on his side and said he was right. Y'all white ass couldn't see why he's right. Isn't this just blaming everyone except liberals? I mean, he's blaming the Democratic Party, I think. Like, the only issue I had with it was that go back, he soft calls you out. I think the only issue I had with his analysis was when he was talking about like Joe Biden would have won almost, like, or Joe Biden would have performed better than Kamala Harris, but like that wasn't correct. I think Joe Biden had to drop out because he was spectacularly bad because how old he was. And not only that, but also I just don't I mean, I think that it was bad campaigning overall, which I don't even think FD disagrees with. Like, I don't think FD disagrees with the fact that like policies played a role. I think I guess the disagreements that we kind of have are like how much of a factor how much of a factor Kamala's race and sex plays, I do think that it certainly played a role, of course. But I think that you can overcome those odds, and a good politician should be able to overcome those odds. And the only way to overcome those odds is with charisma, and more importantly than that is with good policies. Because Kamala Harris was aware that racism played a formative role in the mindset of Americans, right? That's why she never did that Hillary Clinton style, like, I'm a woman and you have to vote for me shit. You know what I mean? She knew. And maybe even focused a little bit too much on the whites in the suburbs because of that, where she was like, oh, well, it's because I'm a black woman. They're never going to like me. So I have to do my very best to like get them to like me so that we can win.
This isn't everyone to my left. You know who you are.
This is not even a soft call out, man. What the fuck are you guys talking about? You guys are so silly.
And you know who you are too. This election's results are beholding to the same massive forces that American politics have always been beholden to. White supremacist patriarchy in its varied and most subtle forms. Again, if you don't see the role that racism and misogyny played in this situation, I invite you to present your best argument in the comments. But then after that, tell me what you're doing next. One of the reasons I voted for Kamala is because I wanted to avoid making a video like this, because I knew as soon as she started losing that I was probably going to have to make something like this. Because while Kamala represents a horrible status quo that I've been talking about from jump, and be clear where I stand, to me, there's value in not resetting the meta of what resistance looks like to the institutions that both Trump and Harris really work for. I might be wrong about this. This is not a hill I'll die on. In fact, if you look at like the person that Trump just appointed as his borders are, that same guy that people are crying about worked for Barack Obama. Like, that say that you can't compare the two, you're lying to yourselves. But anyway, in the aftermath of this election, the whole game has been reset. We're putting effort into settling down foaming at the mouth liberals who are going full mask off with Zionism, imperialism. We're also dealing with charged up conservatives preparing for the Christo-fascist regime that Trump is trying to put in place. Resources that may have went to further resistance for Palestine are going to be used to fight under the Muslim ban here in the United States. Bad immigrant policy that we already had is going to be leveled up to militarized mass deportation. And this isn't even getting into the drastic changes that will likely face LGBTQ people and especially trans people going forward. And I'm not saying all this to prepare for a future I told you so, because at the end of the day, Kamala and the Democratic Party deserve exactly what they get. They are bad for all the reasons we know them to be bad. And all the things we're complaining about are exactly why they're bad. So they deserve it, but we don't. So what are you going to do about it? After you leave your comment of approval or your comment of disapproval, what are you going to do next? What meeting do you have on your calendar? Have you reached out to your neighbors to see who you can coalition build with? Are you capable of protecting yourself or others? What are you doing besides watching my videos? I don't know what should be done next. I'm just a creative. I'm not a leader or an organizer. I'm barely affiliated myself. But I will tell you, regardless of what you think of this video's thesis and me, now that the election is over, neither of those things are all that important. Whatever work you are doing or planning to do while supporting or resisting a Kamala Harris presidency, you should be doing the same exact thing under Trump. You need to wrangle whatever loose threads you have developed from this, get over whatever it is that you're needing to get over, and get back to work in whatever way you can. So in support of that, the pinned comment of this video will be used as a place to list organizing opportunities and networks of support. Please be responsible, as this is a Google platform that is public. None of this is secure, but if you have a safe way to share an org that you want to support and pull people into, please list them there, contact info for them, location, etc. in that pinned comment. Please put nothing else in that comment because I don't want it to get bogged down with debate. Feel free to broaden that discussion elsewhere in the comments, or if you're still not with me in my explanation, explain why. Again, I hope somebody finds, I hope I look stupid. I hope this video ages really poorly because I'm just so fucking wrong about American politics. Please show me how I'm wrong. For what it's worth, I'm praying for everyone to win regardless. That's all I got for today, y'all. No sponsor for this one. Peace, I'm out.
I agree with FD Signifier that that racism plays a major role in this stuff in elections. I don't disagree with that at all. I think disagreeing with that would be disagreeing with reality. I just think that the way to overcome bigotry, the intersectionality of bigotry, you have to have a fucking universal, bold agenda of change that addresses with honesty and earnesty the many problems that, you know, white working class Americans as well as Americans of every background are experiencing. This is why I always stress the importance of universality, because I'm always like, listen, like, black people are not magical, mystical beings. Trans people are not magical, mystical beings that are not that are not impacted by market conditions, you know? In some ways, I think the Democratic Party has so successfully created this narrative that, like, they weaponize against Bernie Sanders, for example, with like cynical identity politics, where they were like, oh, Bernie is bad on black issues because he doesn't talk about criminal justice enough. It's like, first of all, he does. And secondly, not only does Bernie talk about that, but he also talks about other issues that are other issues that are genuinely impactful for everyone. Like when Bernie's talking about universal health care, if black people are disproportionately fucked over by the current healthcare system, given the economic conditions that black people are facing in this country, then universal health care helps black people too. It disproportionately helps black people, as a matter of fact. That's it. As long as you're not fucking running around and being like, yeah, no, we're gonna do universal health care except for black people in the way that like FDR carved out, specific subsects of the American working class in the New Deal era, in the OG New Deal. As long as you don't do that, then it's great. And Democrats have cynically countered against that position, have cynically painted themselves as like, no, you can only be woke, an advocate for social justice, if you're like if you're channeling hyper specific campaign promises. Anyway, I want to watch this Jimmy the Giant video about how he escaped the alt-right, and apparently he actually gives a shout out to Destiny in here somewhere, but I still want to watch it.
It is brought to you by Squarespace. Yes, my brothers, my brodies, my woadies. I'm going to do another one of these little talk to cams. You might have noticed, through some of my videos, I officially joined the woke brigade. It's unfortunate, I didn't really want to, but I'm going to talk how we got here. My political arc has been pretty insane. At one point, I was in a Nico Malama video supporting Trump. That's me. I'll admit it. Blurry boy.
Trauma Reporters UK. I'm here. Look at my hat. I love Donald Trump.
So today we're going to talk about how I managed to escape the alt-right pipeline.
Up yours, woke moralists. How big is Luton?
It's 200,000 population.
And how many mosques?
45.
There will never be peace on this earth so long as we have this book. It's a violent and cursed book.
Attacks on mosques, other minority communities singled out, wanton violence alongside racist rhetoric.
Seems Jimmy the Giant was a real Brexit geezer. What the fuck happened? What the fuck happened, Jimmy? You were on the right side of history, mate. You were a proper bloke. A proper Brexit geezer. The woke got you, eh?
When I was a young gangster, a YG, I was a little bruh, right? A little bruh. I'm about 13 years old.
Damn, this motherfucker looked like JonTron.
We're invited into school. It was mandatory, we weren't invited. And we had to do a speech. So, my mate goes up and he does the history of Chelsea Football Club. A girl goes up and she does about horse riding. I go up with my little thumb drive, plug it in, 9/11. So I basically proceed to radicalize a classroom of young, impressionable 13-year-olds as to why the American government did 9/11.
Who do you believe was behind 9/11?
Criminal elements of the military-industrial complex, the same ones that staged Gulf of Tonkin, the same ones that staged the mass shootings of Operation Gladio.
Right.
Ooh,
I was in this kind of like early conspiracy theory bubble. But what I want to say is it was interesting, right? Because at that time, being a conspiracy theorist wasn't left and right. It was just anti-establishment. And so whilst I was listening to Alex Jones, I'd also be listening to the Young Turks and listening about Occupy Wall Street. So when I was young, I was just a sort of contrarian hipster. I'm not like a communist, but I'm definitely not a capitalist, and I'm definitely left-wing, and I definitely voted to remain in the EU referendum. And so time goes by, I grow up, and I remember I got, I had a few jobs working like fucking Sainsbury's or B&Q, and that was further fueling my sort of anti-capitalist feelings. But I remember I got one job, and I met this geezer, and he was a proper right-winger.
Capitalism is good because capitalism is freedom. Socialism is bad because socialism is tyranny.
It was like a right-winger in the flesh. I'd never seen one before. I was like, what the fuck hell is this? Capitalism good? Welfare state bad? NHS bad? But you see, although I deeply disagreed with all of his views at the beginning, you gotta remember 13-year-old contrarian Jimmy. He's still in there somewhere. And what he's hearing is contrarian views, you say. Anti-establishment, non-mainstream. Little old hipster Jimmy tapped up this sort of right-wing rhetoric because I realized it was different to everyone else, and that would make me interesting if I believed all these things, right? And like when I say right-wing, it's not, we don't like foreigners. It's stuff like this.
The people who get on welfare lose their human independence and feeling of dignity. They become subject to the dictates and whims of their welfare.
It's really funny because the presentation of this stuff is considered anti-establishment, but it is the most establishment you can get. That's what's hilarious about it. When you have a guy like Milton Friedman being portrayed as an anti-establishment figure, like I'm not, you know, shitting on current Jimmy, right? But I'm saying that like there are a lot of people who probably have had this exact same experience where they think liberalism is woke video games or whatever the fuck, right? And it's anti-establishment to be conservative because everything is liberal and woke video games. When this guy is the most established right-winger you can get, like as established as you can get. His worldview is the neoliberal uniparty. Like people, this is it. He is I mean, yeah, he was a Reagan advisor personally. His writings, his academic literature played a formative role in undermining the global South. It does not get more establishment than that. Just like it doesn't get more like your dad's point of view than Ben Shapiro.
Fair supervisor who can tell them whether they can live here or there, whether they may put in a telephone, what they may do with their lives. They're treated like children.
So now I'm at the doors of the alt-right pipeline, right? I pick up my hat with the light, turn the torch on, grab my pickaxe, and I head in. And the first stop is Jordan Peterson.
And then if I'd said to you, please, I'd rather go by she, how would you respond to that on a personal level? How would...
The way I have responded to that, because I've had a number of conversations with transgendered individuals, is that I use whatever pronoun seems to go along with the persona that they're projecting publicly.
How can I describe the fact that someone who was once a woman, and really still is, had her breasts cut off because she, he, they, their, them had fallen prey to a viciously harmful fad?
So bear in mind, I didn't go to university. I went and just tried to make little businesses. I did a parkour brand, I ran a vegan food store, I did lots of little things. And very importantly, I was not academic.
This motherfucker was all over the place, bro, politically.
Jordan Peterson, to young Jimmy, sounded like how I imagine smart people sound.
So even if you do happen to be that avatar of moral purity that you claim implicitly, the probability that you'd get to act out your goodness in relationship to those possessed by your ideology is zero.
He would use big words, he would do this with his hands, he would think and contemplate. Like he was the sort of caricature of a smart person. And it was very interesting because all of his views tended to be quite contrarian.
I think there's something really interesting about this, especially if Destiny played a formative role in him escaping the alt-right pipeline. What this man doesn't recognize is that he went from one, you know, contrarian figurehead to the other who also falsely presents themselves as like an intellectual giant. Ultimately, though, I will say it's marginally better, I guess, as long as he doesn't pick up on a lot of the other habits, like advocating for white people's right to say the N-word or whatever the fuck, you know what I mean? Or constantly fucking spending time and effort on shitting on left-wing people, or, you know, getting a little too close and personal with neo-Nazis and white nationalists.
Two sort of mainstream views. And he would, again, like my friend, he would talk about the benefits of capitalism. He would talk about natural hierarchies and that it wasn't capitalism's fault for hierarchies, but hierarchies are natural. And so it's very interesting because if you think about what Jordan Peterson is and what he thinks and his words now, back in 2016, it was very different, right?
As a matter of respect, in fact, would you refer to a trans person who asked you to use they, them pronouns, a pronoun which has a several hundred-year historical...
But that's not what we're talking about.
He rises to fame on what he is portraying as a free speech battle. The Canadian government are trying to make it so that if you say the wrong pronouns to a transgender person, you will go to jail. And Jordan Peterson never says something like, I don't...
By the way, that's not even true. I think we always forget to factor in how much of right-wing sentiment is just a lie, and how effective just simply lying from a biased perspective is. I know he doesn't have these opinions, by the way. Now, I'm saying that, like, I'm talking to old Jimmy, right? Old Jimmy the Giant, Jimmy the Little, before he became Jimmy the Giant. It's pretty interesting that an expansion of pre-existing hate crime statutes factored in misgendering, like intentional and deliberate routine misgendering, got so much pickup all around the planet. And it got so bad that the Canadian Bar Association had to basically write out statements over and over again being like, this is not true. Like what Jordan Peterson is saying is just a lie, and nobody cared. Everyone got swept away.
Believe in trans people, and so I don't believe I should say their pronouns. He's not saying that people who do transgender surgeries are butchers. He is saying that by law, I shouldn't be forced to say anything.
Difference between saying that there's something you can't say and saying that there are things that you have to say. And I regard these made-up pronouns, all of them, as the neologisms of radical PC authoritarians.
As I grew up, I kind of realized he misrepresented this bill and he was blowing things out of proportion. But if we just take it on face value and believe what he was saying, then yeah, it seemed illogical to oppose what he was saying. And so whilst I'm going through Jordan Peterson's books, his podcasts, his speeches, etc., I'm getting this feeling that there's this sort of crazy, indoctrinated Marxist left who are trying to suppress your freedom and usher in communism. And so all this is happening all the way in Canada where no one gives a fuck about. But what about here in Britain, right? In Britain, we have a sort of similar scenario. And it involves a man, a very controversial man, by the name of Tommy Robinson. Before we go any further, I want to give a massive shout out to today's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is undoubtedly the best, I'm not kidding, the best platform when it comes to making websites. Beautiful websites, ones that are perfectly tailored to you. With their new design intelligence, which combines the newest AI technology, plus their years of understanding and crafting beautiful website templates, you can now literally type in prompts to the AI and it will create a bespoke website to you and your brand. As well as that, their payment system. So if you're selling goods online and people, maybe you have customers all around the world, Squarespace takes so many different types of payments, it's now easier than ever. From Klarna to ACH Direct Debit, Apple Pay, and you can even do buy now, pay later with Afterpay and Clear.
Wait, what is this? Hard to understand Wagwan with Jank. My Steelman take is maybe he's big braining to influence Trump by pandering. I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't think this guy likes me that much. I think we see the world in very similar ways, but I think he's been primed into not liking me too much, but it'll change. We'll see.
And also, the laborious job of writing product descriptions got a whole world easier with Squarespace's Blueprint AI. You can just bang in a prompt, it will shoot out some text, you can tweak it and change it, and it will save you time, and it's very good quality.
Shit. Fucking hell, mate. Fucking hell, Jimmy. Seems reasonable and open-minded, so never say never. Oh yeah, no, for sure. I think that he has a really good message overall, and I like it. And I'm gonna. He's followed too many debate lords over time. That doesn't matter. A lot of people, I think, arrive at certain conclusions about the world, and whichever way they get there, I don't really fault them for it. It's great as long as they're like moving away from right-wing reactionary thinking. He retweeted it recently and loves Owen Jones. Oh, nice. Yeah. One thing I will say, he was talking about Jordan Peterson, right? And how Jordan Peterson's like rhetoric about I arrived at you through destiny, then washed in you. That's a crazy journey, my man. Holy shit. That's a wild journey. And I mean, there are people in here that fucking probably despised me because they were right wing, or probably despised me because I thought I was like a fucking bad person or whatever. There's plenty of people who make a lot of money presenting me as like a bad guy online professionally. So it is what it is. He's just tweeted about you. He's watching. Oh, hell yeah. Nice. I'm down to have him on. But if he's watching, I want to show him something. Okay? I wonder if he ever watched this video, because he said he was a fan of the Young Turks. And I wonder if he actually ended up watching this video called Jordan Peterson is not a conservative transphobe. This is from December 30th, 2018, right? And here's the thing. Back then, I understood that Jordan Peterson was a conservative transphobe. This is a clickbait title, chat. And I wanted to get people exactly like Jimmy the Giant to click on this video, watch this video where I portrayed the exact same arguments that I have maintained for a very long time. Let's take a look.
That people, and I'm especially thinking of your opponents, get wrong about you.
Their basic proposition is that, you know, first of all, that I'm a right-winger of some sort, and that's just not the case.
Hi guys, just want to remind you all that Jordan Peterson is not a socially conservative lifestyle guru, and he certainly isn't white Deepak Chopra taking advantage of men who feel alienated in our increasingly divided hell world. And you know what? In this short video essay, I will prove that to you. There are plenty of other things I'd love to talk about Peterson, but it would never fit in the format of just one video. So if you have any additional questions or tell me how much I suck, you can direct them to me directly at twitch.tv/Hasanabi, where I'm live every day, or on my Instagram at Hasandi Piker, or my Twitter at Hasan the Hun. Damn, bro, I had 100,000 fucking followers on Twitter and 200,000 on Instagram back then. That's crazy. 5 years ago. All right, let's continue. Let's listen to some of the things Jordan Peterson said in this Breitbart exclusive from a conference where he was the guest speaker alongside many of these other non-ideologue individuals like Sebastian Gorka and Dennis Prager and Tucker Carlson. For the record, I was already shitting on Jordan Peterson being transphobic a long time ago, even far before this, because some of the clips that I pull out, some of the clips that I bring in here, right? This is, you know, December 30th, 2018, okay? December 30th, 2018. It's 6 fucking years ago. But even before then, I kept trying to get people to understand that Jordan Peterson was just like faking the you know, self-help nonsense to push for a lot of dangerous right-wing reactionary ideas, and he was doing so with genuine success. And a lot of people fucking hated me for it back then. Let's watch. Here he is with Charlie Kirk, Donald Trump Jr., Kimberly Guilfoyle, and even Jack Pizzagate Posobiec. Not a conservative, by the way. Just not a conservative.
I think it's partly also a consequence of the fact that we haven't adapted to the birth control pill yet. You know, it was a major technological revolution, the birth control pill, and it's only been 50 years. And we haven't figured out what it means for women to have control over the reproductive function, or what the consequences what the consequences of that should be socially.
Now, Jordan has a lot of wacky ideas about women in the workplace, but that's for another video. In this video, I want to talk about his perspective on trans rights, because that's a big point of contention for a lot of people, including feminist liberal TERFs, or for those of you who are not extremely online, trans exclusionary radical feminists, basically people who say like this.
I'm not saying that people should not be allowed to go through that procedure. What I'm saying is it doesn't make them a woman.
But Hasan, you said he was conservative, and this person's a liberal, and they're in agreement. Yeah, that's also for another video. Okay, back to Peterson. Jordan Peterson initially made a name for himself by misrepresenting Bill C-16 in Canada, which expanded previous legislation on hate speech to include gender identity, in accordance with international human rights. And of course, the backlash was tremendous. People started praising Dr. Peterson as a brave truth teller, finally standing up against those trans bastards who dared to ask for equal rights. And of course, then there were a lot of radical ideologues who claimed that I, Dr. Jordan Peterson, was transphobic. They were all somehow taking me out of context. Look, I'm not against trans people existing. I'm just against being compelled to call someone by a pronoun other than what I think they should be called.
Why are you against the use of alternate pronouns?
I'm against the use of legislation to determine what words that myself and other people are required to utter.
Except the Canadian Bar Association expressly mentions that this is simply a mischaracterization of the law, which is probably why 0 people have gone to jail over misgender crimes in Canada. But what do I know?
I think I've made my position on that clear already. Well, perhaps not to our audience at home who are just being introduced to this. Would you use alternate pronouns? And why not? Because I don't believe that other people have the right to determine what language I use, especially when it's backed by punitive legislation. And when the words that are being required are the constructions, they're artificial constructions of people I regard as radical ideologues whose viewpoint I do not share.
I mean, Peterson's being totally reasonable here, right? Like if a person told me their name was John, I might refuse to call them that because I think their name is actually Bart. Sorry, Bart, you can't compel me to call you anything else. This assignment is totally not arbitrary. Just like gender is totally not a social construct. All men have to express themselves in this traditionally masculine, Western sense, and I've never cared to research how other cultures view gender. Sorry, not going to do it. Someone with less bone density than myself, for example, who can't grow body hair, facial hair, who is 5'4", maybe has a higher pitch, is now going to be considered a woman since gender is absolutely binary. Take that, Jen Shapiro. She is pretty hot, though. But speaking of gender identity and how it absolutely is not functional if we... Dude, I've been running that Ben Shapiro bit for so long. It's crazy. I think I partially am the reason why he fucking grew that beard, bro. Like, I kept saying he can't grow a beard, and I think that motherfucker started putting Rogaine on his face to try and grow a beard. Or maybe because they, like, invented Jen Shapiro in a fucking vacuum, in a vat, Brett Cooper. So then Ben was like, I have to look different than you know, the female version of myself.
If we were to live by Jordan Peterson's rules, let's play a little experiment. What pronouns would you use for this person? What pronouns would you use for this person? Well, how about this person? Or even this beautiful MAGA broad? Or this person whose YouTube channel you should absolutely watch because she's amazing even though she doesn't reply to my DMs on Twitter. Like, imagine meeting up with Valentina Sampaio at a restaurant. How would you point her out? Dr. Peterson claims he called them by the pronoun assigned to them at birth, which is literally insane. For those of you who didn't get the point that I was making, every single person I just showed you are very famous trans people. But yeah, this is totally about free speech and not because Jordan Peterson is a transphobe or whatever.
Do you think a trans woman is a woman?
No. Oh, so that's why he was refusing to do that. I mean, this is a principled academic philosopher king. We're probably taking him out of context. I'm sure he has reasons. Give us your reasons, Dr. Peterson.
Why not?
Because I think that women are capable, generally speaking, of having babies, and they have female genitalia, and they have an XX chromosome, and I think the biological markers are relevant.
Okay.
Total bro tip. You should only follow pronouns if you pass. Yeah, for the record, you cynical little shit. Yes, I will address that as well in a second. Just wait for the rest of the video, okay? Before chirping. Yeah. No, this person is shitting on me, saying like, oh, classic reactionary thinking. You should only value someone's gender pronouns if they pass. No, man, sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's good to fucking start the conversation, especially considering that gender is a socially developed phenomenon and it's a social construct. It's probably important to meet people where they're at, you know? Maybe that's precisely the reason why I do a decent job at converting people away from transphobia, and you just fucking come in here and enjoy the show and can, you know, be entertained and know that this is a safe space for you.
First off, Buck Angel has XX chromosomes and female genitalia, so I'd be hard-pressed for Dr. Peterson to point out to him in a crowd and try to get others to identify him as a woman, since all of those standards apply to old Buck.
This opens up the conversation for people. This is not where the conversation ends, okay? I'm not like a trans medicalist or whatever the fuck. But this is a very good way to start the conversation for a lot of people. Passability is not the end-all be-all of being trans. Okay, but shut the fuck up. I know better than you. I'm a cisgender heterosexual man who literally used to be transphobic. That's it. If your goal is to convert transphobic people to not be transphobic, then yeah, I'm the fucking king of knowing that, okay? Not only have I gone through this journey individually, but also simultaneously have been able to bring a lot of people on board with that lived experience. Get mad all you want. It's the truth. And it's kind of funny because like I literally am about to bring this part up as well in terms of passability not being the end all be all. Like it's coming. Yeah. Standpoint theory for transphobia. Exactly. I'm going to start living the fuck up, dude. Hey, it's called Bodies and Spaces, okay? As a former transphobic person, I'm doing a Bodies and Spaces. You help me evolve my understanding concerning transphobia as well. I know. This is why I always fucking tell people, like, listen, if I'm talking about black issues, okay, and you're a black person, you're a black chatter, it's not for you. You're black. You already know this shit, okay? You live it. If I'm talking about trans issues, you're trans, you know this already, okay? I'm talking to transphobes. I'm talking to fucking black, not black chatters, but white chatters who are anti-black racists, you know? So don't fucking come at me and be like, I don't really like the way you didn't utilize academic language. Anyway.
Also, are we no longer considering girls who haven't had their first periods women? What about women who have gone through menopause? Sorry, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, you're no longer a woman. I will be referring to you as a male now. Do you see my point? Socially speaking, the reality is that we make assumptions about gender from visual cues and not off of chromosomes. Yet the leading champion of the scientific argument constantly conflates biological gender with the contextual assignment of gender we apply socially every day. But even on the biological front, Peterson's principled analysis falls short, since there are plenty of people who would be considered intersex, specifically 1.7% of the world's population. In context, by the way, if you want to say that, well, that's a tiny minority of people who gives a well, you're a douchebag. Also, that number is higher than the number of Jewish people on this planet. Okay, have you made it up to this point? Now, here are some personal opinions that I have that will most likely piss off some people who considered me an ally up to this point. So if you're deep into gender theory, this might upset you, and if you're a trans person, you might think I'm excusing transphobia, so there it is, I'm issuing a trigger warning. Are we alone yet? Okay, I get why this concept is terrifyingly alien to so many people, okay? This is partially due to centuries of oppression, lack of medical advances, the Nazis setting back trans research by centuries with their book burnings, and in this day and age, a lack of representation in media. I get it. It's already difficult enough to defend your worldview on things that you barely understand, like complex political theories, but changing your mind on something as concrete as gender that you've been conditioned into thinking about in a binary way requires tremendous amounts of introspection. So here is my olive branch to those who haven't had to think about this until now. Trans women are women, and trans men are men. So while I understand that your only introduction to trans folk has probably been hysterical college freshmen on YouTube compilations screaming at your intellectual daddy, there's more to it than that. There are plenty of brilliant trans men and women who are more informed on this subject than myself, and I highly suggest you take a look at their work, especially ones that immediately come to mind right now are ContraPoints, and I already mentioned her in the video, and my esteemed moderator is my Twitch at twitch.tv. Going to tyt.uk. UID Network is now available on.
So, bring back the breakdown for the TikTok era. Yeah. My point is, my arguments haven't really changed. You're so much more articulate when you aren't in front of the scrutiny machine. Oh, you mean chatters? You mean chat? A sea of conflicting opinions, all primed against me, constantly doing the same thing that they hate when my enemies, my ideological enemies, do it. Anyway, like that one chatter who was fucking saying like, oh, you're doing transmedicalism, like implying that I was doing transmedicalism, and it's not like an effective starting point for a lot of people who genuinely think trans people are gross, weird, bad, whatever.
So be sure to head over to squarespace.com/Jimmy the Giant, and to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain, use the code Jimmy the Giant. Anyway, back to the video.
This book is the reason. This book is the reason we're in such a mess.
Boys, I'm not proud of this, but I'm just being an honest person. I'm trying to explain where I was at, how I got to where I was, and how I am where I am now. And so I come across Tommy Robinson in this period of time where he goes to jail for, as he's presenting it to the audience online, trying to report on Muslim grooming gangs. He goes to jail. And I see this as a suppression of journalism, a suppression of free speech by a tyrannical government. You know, and I ignored the fact that it was contempt of court, and he knew exactly it was contempt of court, and he did it deliberately to provoke this reaction. But the way it was being presented was very clever. Again, it was all about free speech. It wasn't about the underlying issue of Islam, etc., but it was just about free speech. And so when you're already primed to be libertarian, pro-free speech, and you're perceiving these attacks on free speech, you start to wonder, why are they attacking these people for their speech? And it unfortunately has this effect of making you think that the person is a truth teller and the government are trying to suppress them. And it reinforces your belief in what they're saying must have some truth to it, if they want to hide it so bad. And these people, these what I would now consider grifters, they know that. They know that that's the response and the feeling it's going to create in people. They want to be martyrs because then people will follow them even more ardently.
Free Tommy Robinson, and free him now.
Gert Wilders, just a peanut gallery of some of the worst scumbags, dude. Holy shit.
And so, yeah, I go to like a rally, like a free speech rally when Tommy Robinson's about to go to jail, and I come across Nico, and I see Nico, and I've seen him online, and I saw how he was trying to present everyone that went to a Tommy Robinson rally as a racist. And I knew from my perspective, and knowing who I was, I knew I wasn't a racist. And so I go up to Nico and I tell the people around him that he's trolling you and he's trying to like make you look stupid online. And then Nico does...
Jimmy tweeted at me, he said, cheers for watching. I'm gonna have him on the stream if he wants to after we're done watching this video.
Misrepresent me in the video, and he says that I went up to the police and told them to get rid of Nico.
The police then came over and surprise, he started crying to them as well.
When in reality, I was actually saying to the police that Nico has his free speech. Because, you know, I'm fucking obsessed with free speech in this period of time. I don't know why. I think it's the single most important thing on earth. But either way, like, as much as I disagree with myself for being at that rally and supporting Tommy Robinson in that time, I still stand by the fact that I don't think these people understood why people were presenting them as racist, right? And I just want to touch on that.
Tell me a Trump policy right now.
I support...
Fake. Waffle. You're waffling, man. Yeah, answer the question.
I support his trade policy.
How dare you fake this? How dare you?
You know, now, from, you know, the view I have now, I understand there are sort of two types of racism. There's like overt racism, which is like, you know, I fucking hate migrants when you send them back, they're the worst. And then you have this kind of more like subconscious racism, or like in effect racism. And what I mean by that is, like, I knew I wasn't racist because I grew up.
Oh my God. This is literally, he's talking about the permission structure. Permissible bigotry versus that masquerades as common sense versus out and about racism that even racist people go, over. Now, the interesting part about this is something I talk about quite frequently, as you guys know. The interesting part about this also is that depending on where you're at on the reactionary spectrum, like going to a literal EDL rally, you could still assume that you're not a fucking racist person. And I think ultimately that's because no matter how much we yell at people and say society is racist or whatever, even racists understand that racism is bad up to a certain point, which is why they always subconsciously, or sometimes deliberately and consciously, try to hide their true perspective. Some people might not even recognize that this is their true perspective. And I believe Jimmy when he says he didn't understand why people were saying he was racist. Like, I just care about free speech. That was the entry point for him. People making convincing arguments. People telling him like, oh no, this is common sense and this is free speech. And I think that there are a lot of people out there who are rudderless, who are fragile, who are vulnerable. And people like Jordan Peterson open up the floodgates and move them in the direction of the likes of Tommy Robinson. It's a perfect ideological journey. I mean, it's obvious. He went from watching Jordan Peterson videos and thinking that Jordan Peterson is not like right wing at all. He's just like some woke Canadian professor who is using neutral language, using objective language, and is just simply saying it like it is, to a guy like Tommy fucking Robinson. And Douglas Murray, I hate this piece of shit.
Very multiculturally. And I liked people of different races. I had lots of friendships with them and I got along with them very well. So I never in my heart felt anything bad towards people of different races. But what can happen from there is when you think you're like immune to racism, you sometimes are more susceptible to it in a way, but just a different type of racism. These grifters know they can't just say that, I don't know, black people are inferior genetically, although some of them have started doing that again. They've found sneakier ways of wrapping it, often by hiding behind culture. These pundits will lie and say stuff like 84% of grooming gangs are Asian Pakistani, which has been endlessly disproven. It is white people who make up the majority of grooming gangs. But all this misinformation can lead you to believe that their culture is inferior to ours, and therefore we can't mix. And with the Tommy Robinson thing, it's kind of the same when it comes to Islam, right? You didn't hate people for being like...
This guy's awesome. I love this video. Holy shit. Amazing.
Having brown skin. You were simply critiquing their ideology, their beliefs.
You wouldn't do that with
Sir William
Would
Gladstone
you do that with the
that.
Bible? Show some respect.
Show some respect.
Show some respect.
Have you read this book?
For people.
Have you read this?
Piers Morgan, the fucking woke Quran defender, by the way. God, fucking Piers, man. What a fucking clown! What a fucking bellend! This is bellend on bellend violence, mate.
There are over a billion people.
So, you know, I'm listening to the greatest hits, right? I'm listening to Ben Shapiro debate some 12-year-old feminist. I'm listening to Jordan Peterson, Matt Walsh, I'm Joe Rogan till I fucking die. And I find myself accepting that I must be right-wing now. And, you know, little hipster Jimmy, that's cool because now I'm different to everyone. I'm the contrarian, right? I have all the different opinions. Oh no, the sky isn't blue. Actually, no, it's a shade of maroon. And like when you're listening to all this stuff, you get this sort of impression of the left, like what you're perceiving the left to be like, basically the worst of the left.
You know you're a millennial when you question whether or not it's ethical to bring children into this world. Because of climate change. We don't really know whether or not the world's going to be habitable in 30 years.
And so you just get pushed further and further right from more of a reactionary position rather than some actual ideological and maybe academic understanding of economies and politics. It just sort of is a feeling. And it's so funny, like when Ben Shapiro and these sort of people get famous off of facts don't care about your feelings. But to be honest, like conservatives these days, it just seems to be mainly emotion. It's how they feel about topics.
That's, dude, perfect. No notes. And that's always been the case, by the way. Just so people understand. Conservative argumentation has never been around facts. Ben Shapiro actually marketed himself as like the facts-based champion. But I have hours upon hours of video dedicated specifically to how not facts-based Ben Shapiro's arguments are. Like, they've only been able to successfully market themselves as quote-unquote facts-based. But in fact, most of it is just, and this is unfortunately a common trait for all debate lords in general, debate lording online in an unstructured setup that doesn't have like points or whatever is simply who can rationalize logical fallacies faster and justify it. That's all debates devolve into. And I say this as someone who has also, partaken in this. I have done it myself, and I still continue to do it myself because I understand like hypocrisy baiting and logical fallacies are actually a very quick way to win points in this conversation, to win people over to your side. But yeah, make no mistake, Republicans have never, ever, ever fucking had facts on their side. They just haven't. They do, however, massage the data. They do a very good job of that, but lately they haven't even tried to massage the data because it doesn't really matter. There's no need for them to massage the data because there is a fucking faucet of right-wing media out there that just reinforces this false notion over and over and over again. And many people don't even fucking want the truth. There's no more intellectual curiosity. Okay? We've gotten to a point where people just want someone who agrees with them to tell them they're right. Okay? It's all fucking vibes based. Yeah. Like, yeah, they went from 1350 shit to simply saying blacks eat cats. Thank you. That's a fantastic example. 1350 still is not actually data. It's a false interpretation of data. We've talked about it quite a bit. 13% of black people cause 50% of crimes is the catch-all for that. It's FBI crime statistics, but specifically it's FBI arrest statistics that they're falsely claiming is, leading to convictions, when the only thing that the 1350 data actually shows is that, especially when paired up with additional data that you understand that the American criminal justice system actually over-prosecutes and over-arrests black people for the same proclivity to do crime as white people, that the 1350 statistic only shows that reality, which is that black people are prosecuted harder, black people get longer sentences, and more importantly, they are over-policed. So if you don't fully comprehend the data in and of itself, you could just say catch-all 1350. That's actually still cherry-picked, right? Having said that, however, now they've moved on from that. They don't even do the cherry-picked data shit no more. They just simply go, Haitians are eating cats. Black people eat cats and dogs. We have to deport them. Something to remember.
They hate when you bring up academic papers and actual facts, and they don't trust any of that.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
And ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
And either way, I find myself as a right-winger. I have not descended into overtly racist beliefs or overtly transphobic beliefs, misogynistic beliefs. I haven't gone that far, but I probably do house some sort of unconscious discriminatory beliefs in maybe trans people.
Bro, first of all, you're British. That's just given. It's just a part of the territory. Secondly, I think the very fact that you acknowledge that is an incredibly healthy step. Okay? like awareness, self-awareness of this sort is so fucking good, dude. Holy shit. It's fantastic. And people will say he's a right-winger. No, he used to be a former right-winger. And he's saying he still has some subconscious biases, right? And it's great. It's fantastic to recognize that and work against them. You know what I mean? And learn and go on your journey of understanding the truth about the world.
People, perhaps even women to a degree, again, often wrapping their push for equality and better rights as some kind of Marxist revolution. But I believe in the typical sort of right-wing viewpoint that the state should be smaller, that people are responsible for themselves, and probably that like poor people are just lazy and they need to fix their own shit, and that billionaires and corporations are really good and like, you know, sort of, unless
he's saying that was his former position.
They're the ones that, I don't know, Russell Brand says is bad, and then all of a sudden they're bad because they're tied to, I don't know, George Soros. George Soros business, bad. Bill Gates business, bad. But Elon Musk buying Twitter, good. Very good. Anyway, I'm deep in the pipeline, right? I'm deep. COVID happens. Obviously, I don't get vaxxed. I don't wear the mask. I'm sorry if I killed anyone. And, you know, again, I regret that position now. I literally didn't want to get vaxxed, not because I thought it had 5G in it or something, but just because I was so sort of libertarian right-wing that I didn't like the fact the government were telling me to do it. And like, I don't know, I'm here today, I'm vaccinated, and woke police haven't come to my door yet, so probably I was overreacting.
Vaccine passports. While we've been looking in other directions, they are being slowly yet deliberately introduced. Are they the linchpin in a global surveillance network?
So you might be wondering, like, what was the moment? Like, when did it all change? When did the dam break? And there was a moment, right? And I can kind of point to it specifically. And it was through making my videos. Now, as you know, you guys are watching, you're probably really into all the social political stuff I do. But originally, I was a parkour YouTuber. And then I become like an extreme sports YouTuber. And when I got to the end of this period in 2022, I wanted to diversify my content, right? And I remember genuinely, I thought I was probably even going to make like those sort of right-wing documentary series, like things like Jen or like some of Moon's stuff, you know, that kind of thing. I thought I'd end up in that ilk. But you see, because I was a smart bruh and I could read the room, I knew that I could make a video why Jordan Peterson's the best man alive. I knew I had to take my time to kind of meander. So I made a video on a very specific topic.
Bro, this dude is literally talking about Tyler Hitler Vera's like origination point. It's kind of crazy. Like he could have gone down the fucking Tyler Hitler Vera pipeline, you know? Crazy.
About chavs. Clothing brands that you didn't like were called chavvy. Rough neighborhoods were considered chav infested. But what exactly is a chav? And most importantly, where did they all go? And so I made this video. It's really interesting if you rewatch it, because my biases and all of my thinking going into this video is that chavs are bad because they were dickheads and they chose to be bad. But whilst making the video and wanting to address the question, like, where did chavs go? Why did they disappear? I stumbled across a geezer called Owen Jones.
That's crazy. Owen Jones. That's amazing that Owen Jones flipped him, dude. That's amazing. Wait, what? What happened to the audio? Wait, I can hear it. Why can't you guys hear it? You guys can hear this, right? Can you hear me? What the fuck? Chat, this is weird as fuck. Bro. When I play the video, OBS does not have sound. When I play the video, OBS does not show sound, but I can hear it. I can hear Owen Jones. What the fuck? But when I play music, when I play lo-fi hip-hop radio, you can hear it. And it shows. OBS also shows that there is sound. Look, but here, let me play the audio, and you guys will not believe me, but I can hear the audio. But OBS does not play the audio. Look at the desktop audio.
I see Owen Jones and all of my, but you see it in the video. I'm like, look, guys.
Never mind. It was not worthwhile to even complain about it. All right. Well, it's just the Owen Jones bit that is very weird. That just shows that there is no. Just the Owen Jones bit in that video was just not being featured on my OBS for some fucking weird reason. I don't know why. But he just talks about chavs. It's fine. It's not that big of a deal.
I'm about to quote Owen Jones. I don't agree with him, but what he says about chavs is really interesting. You should probably listen to it. Truly a war in the public sphere. The author and journalist Owen Jones, who I have to admit, I don't really agree with him on a lot. He wrote an entire book called Chavs. So I read it and I'm like, fuck, maybe chavs were like a product of their environment and their economic status. Bear in mind, this is the opposite. This is the antithesis of my view, is that I would have believed as a right-winger that cultures are just like people who make decisions to behave in the
Oh shit. And that's when it clicks. Damn, we are victim to material circumstances. God damn, I need more of that good shit. Oh! What are chavs? Chavs are they are like low ranking white folk, basically. They are the hicks. They're the youth. British hogs. Well, gammons are British hogs as well. Council housing and violence. That's what chavs comes from. Yeah, they live in council housing, which is public housing in the UK, and they're poor. They're just poor white guys.
the way they want to. So these are bad people who are choosing to be bad. So after this video, I go down different rabbit holes. I'm making different subcultures. I do skin.
Bro gained material, bro gained class consciousness after he listened to one libtard defend his identity. I love that.
Heads, and I do football hooligans, which are both in a very interesting period of time, which is the Thatcher era. And the more I research into Thatcher...
Oh, to be fair, this also does make sense, because, like, I think a lot of... It's really interesting when you see it, like, a lot of the Reform Party people just, like, despise Thatcher and despise neoliberalism and don't even fucking understand that, like, it is continued through the Tories that they voted for over and over again. And then they got frustrated by it, and they're, like, now looking for a right-wing reactionary movement outside of the Labour-Tory dynamic. So I think that I would say working class British people are definitely more class conscious than working class American people are. It's weird. But then also at the same time, like, there is, it's less mystified. Class is less mystified. But also, Tories have successfully been able to shit on the working class. Whereas in America, historically speaking, since the Thatcher era, like, they have lordships, right? In the UK, like, they have people who are lords. They have something that transcends beyond Marxian class dynamics, where they literally have a monarchy, and they have remnants of said monarchy in the form of lordship, right? Like, you literally have lords, and they're Tories. There are plenty of Tories, and even fucking Labour Party members as well, but, like, certainly a big chunk of Tories that are straight up a part of this old feudal dynamic. And on top of that, there is, like, open, overt disdain for the working class in the UK by, dare I say, liberal, neoliberal media outlets. And it's really interesting because the dynamic is very different in America, where there's no class consciousness. But that is precisely the reason why American right-wing politicians, especially from the Ronald Reagan era. Ronald Reagan is the Margaret Thatcher of America, by the way. Neoliberals. One is a Tory, the other one's a Republican. Ronald Reagan, on the other hand, while implementing the same exact policies as Thatcher, adjusted to American material conditions, was actually hamming up this working class bona fide, this working class background that he didn't quite necessarily have, even though he was, I guess, technically, if you want to call it that, a labor leader. He was, you know, the president of I think he was president of SAG, right? Is this before the SAG-AFTRA joined together? Anyway, whatever, it doesn't matter. He was a red baiting piece of shit and actually outed communists within SAG, but Screen Actors Guild, for those of you who don't know. But he basically portrayed himself as, like, this, as an actor, portrayed himself as a fake working class hero. Whereas in the UK, these guys were like, they're elite. They did not hide that they were elite. They said that they were elite. And the working poor suck shit. So the working poor that now actually identify as, like, Reform Party members, weirdly enough, still hate Margaret Thatcher, not realizing that Reform is a modified version of Margaret Thatcher. So they looped back around with reactionary politics and white identitarian principles, for example, the anti-immigrant shit. They looped back around into believing that, like, Reform demonstrates a change from these austerity politics of the neoliberal Tory past. It's very interesting. I literally wish you were being broadcasted the entirety of Britain right now. It's insane how the working class here think they have more in common with the Tories than immigrants or refugees. Yeah, except when I correctly predicted what would happen in the UK in the immediate aftermath of the Labour wipeout, right? Which was more so a fuck you to the 14 years of austerity or 16 years of austerity the Tories have demonstrated. and the incumbent disadvantage had gotten far, the global incumbency disadvantage that we saw in many of the Western world got to a point where it was impossible to reckon with. Many of the liberal Labor Party defenders in my comments were telling me, Hassan, you're out of your element. You just don't simply understand British politics. Turns out I was right. Will those people actually recognize that I was right? I don't know. We'll see. God, Labor Party fucking spear-dicking Jeremy Corbyn was the worst possible thing, the best possible thing for British fascism, and the worst possible thing for the future of Britland.
And see how she completely flipped this country on its head. She completely radicalized Britain into being extreme neoliberal capitalists. And it's kind of become just assumed that that's how the world has always worked. That's how we are. But then I discovered that at some point in society, we weren't fucking insane capitalists that we are right now. I've discovered this because there was a period of time called the post-war consensus, which I talk about fucking endlessly on this channel. But in that period of time, we followed a style of economics that was called Keynesianism.
This is, by the way, the British version of New Deal. This is the British New Deal Democrat era.
Which meant that the government's job was to make sure everyone was employed and to tax the wealthy at higher rates, use that money to build infrastructure that benefited the people. And embarrass.
By the way, the shortcomings of Keynesian economics and the shortcomings of social democracy is that it inevitably opens up the floodgates, because it is always going to simply extend capitalism, and that same dynamic, that same class dynamic that exists in capitalism, the inherent contradictions, are always going to create a society that is susceptible to the same economic factors, and inevitably the capital owners will overcome any sort of socially democratic changes that former governance has implemented. And this comes in the form of austerity. This comes in the form of clawing back social safety nets and rampant privatization, which creates instability, which creates economic volatility. And in that process, you arrive at the likes of the reform movement.
Bear in mind, you know, I'm listening to Donald Trump saying, make America great again, and everyone's harping on about how the world was better back in like the 60s and 50s. And then I find out the reason why it was better was because we had mass public investment. This investment led to the greatest economic boom in history, raised many of the working class into the middle class, which created a whole host of new industries, new products, basically, it was good shit. What we did then was good. And you know, you got to bear in mind that I am being told the only answer to life's problems is dog eat dog, free market capitalism. Get the government out of everything. The government can do nothing right. Only the geniuses of commerce can do anything. Like,
it's funny because it's like these guys always go with the real capitalism hasn't worked, you know? How do you learn any of this shit? No, I don't know. I was just born with this information beamed into my dome. No, man, you just read.
Do anything. Like our water supply that has no piss and poo in it. Or like our really quick and definitely on time and affordable train system. Or like our really affordable housing that people definitely aren't speculating on and shrinking the middle class.
Private water companies are dumping huge amounts of raw sewage in Britain's rivers and off its coastlines. They're doing so to save money, to ensure returns for shareholders, and by extension, to guarantee massive salaries for bosses at the top.
And so yeah, time's going past, man, and I'm learning this shit, and I'm like, fuck, and I'm starting to realise, like, I don't know if I believe all the things that I believe about right-wing politics, but I hadn't accepted it, right? I was becoming more and more distrustful. Things like this, right? 1 month, I went on holiday.
What did you read to learn about the permission structure with racism? Okay, that was just observation. I don't think, or I'm sure things that I've read on it, things that I've read about like white supremacy here and there have played a role in this, but I think the permission structure, like the permissible boundaries of racist sentiment, is just something that I've observed over the past 10 years of fucking, of existing in American politics.
To Thailand. I walk in a coffee shop and I see the most beautiful woman on earth, who is now my wife, and she is Ukrainian. I go to Ukraine. Literally, during the war, I've been to Ukraine many times, and I've experienced air raids. I've heard bombs go off.
Yeah, more attacks. Putin must be having a slow day.
All the while, I look on my phone at all the right-wingers talking about Ukraine, and they believe that Zelensky is like, I don't know, a blue-haired feminist or something.
I will stress this again. One of the greatest enemies of our nation.
This is my favorite clip, dude. Ukraine is the greatest enemy of mankind. Oh, this clip, man. This clip lives in my mind. It's like right up there with the Vosh clip of Tacoma wept. It's so good. A big MMO content creator, Josh Strife, says you and the extreme left are responsible for political instability. He was a teacher in the UK before, and it's crazy how he doesn't understand the actual conservatives and fascists. Wait, what? Who the fuck is Josh Strife?
26.
The Josh Strife Hayes situation is crazy. This motherfucker said he made a video where he's referring to himself. Wait, what is he? Where does he bring me up? I would love to see this. I would love to see what he had to say. Another very famous clip is that doesn't work for me either. Steven Crowder yelling at his pregnant wife. That's an Asman Orbiter. They actually had beef years ago. Oh damn! I would love to hear what his takes are. God, gamers just so bad at politics. It's kind of shocking that he's like a teacher in the UK.
American Revolution at all.
Like the fact that you have a teacher in the UK saying this kind of shit is wild. Same shelf system. I know. We have so much in common. He's on the other side of room. Yeah, he's in my room. He's actually beaming this from my room.
Right now is Ukraine.
And they're trying to say that it's actually NATO and NATO are the bad guys and America's bad, even though we're pro-America.
Okay, well, I found one disagreement. I mean, I am not in the pro-Russia camp at all. I'm definitely in the fuck Vladimir Putin camp, but I also am not exactly fond of NATO either. So there it is. This makes sense as to why he would be maybe pro-Destiny. He really jumped on the fucking pro-NATO. Second disagreement is coming.
America is bad. And, you know, I'm learning more about the Ukrainian conflict and all the history of how it came to be and why we defend them and why we can't allow Russia to just go and take over sovereign nations. And so you learn more and more about this. But then there was two people I come across that really, like, cemented the change, right? So I'm becoming distrustful of the right. I'm starting to see, like, you know, their takes on Ukraine as being ridiculous. And then I come across a streamer. So right now we're deep in the sort of Andrew Tate era. Andrew Tate has blown up. And at first it was kind of, you know, it was kind of fun. It was like, especially if you're sort of a young right-wing libertarian type, you need to get strong to look after yourself, look after women, looking after the people you love. Like that sort of stuff was kind of nice. I started going to the gym. I started doing all that stuff. I was always sort of into the self-help stuff. So all that shit sounded good. And then he started to talk about women.
You want to know why NATO is bad? Remember everything I talked about with like right-wing movements, reactionary movements, fascist movements growing in Western Europe especially? That's NATO, okay? That's it. NATO is a mechanism of enforcement of American empire, okay? It's a protection racket, and Russia's militant actions in Ukraine, its unjustifiable invasion of Ukraine, is quite literally a perfect gift to NATO. That comment is too much, is it? It's too much if you don't know anything about NATO, if you don't know anything about the history of NATO. It's also pretty funny to come to a Turkish chatter's stream who grew up in Turkey, who, you know, directly understands NATO's involvement in his country in a similar fashion. Turkey is a NATO nation, and Turkey had its own version of Operation Gladio, which eviscerated, during the Cold War, which eviscerated any sort of left-wing movement in the country. So NATO was a very good way for America to come in and beef up all of the right-wing fascists in the aftermath of World War II that had died out and were getting absolutely owned, understandably, by the resistance groups, the partisans, the communists, the socialists, the trade unionists that actually had fought to liberate their own countries and fight against the Nazis. NATO comes in, immediately reasserts the dominance of fascist, right-wing militant groups, causes decades of instability, oftentimes direct acts of terror, you know, bombing campaigns, things like that. Paired up with the Marshall Plan, it recreates the exact same former right-wing dominance in a lot of these countries, sometimes by directly utilizing Nazis, like in Western Europe. What's crazy is being anti-NATO was a mainstream left position in the West like a few decades ago. Modern SOCDEM NAFO freeze are like a recent invention. Yeah, I think part of it is because of Vladimir Putin's irredentist actions in Ukraine. I think that is a major role in this. A lot of people were like, what the fuck? This is completely unacceptable. And I think a lot of people, especially when they have like nascent Western chauvinist perspectives, see a bad guy that's a foreign adversary do bad shit. and they go, oh, we can feel good for once about something that we're doing at the global stage. Because as I've reiterated over and over again, Ukraine has a right to emancipation. They have every right to purge Russian invaders from their boundaries. It's a perfectly moral and justifiable act. The problem, however, is that America has no real interest in Ukrainian emancipation or to stop the pain or stop the bloodshed, and every interest in offloading their old weapons and basically picking apart formerly state-owned industries in Ukraine for pennies on the dollar with a massive loan scheme that they've created. Anyway.
To some degree, as a man, you have to instill drama in the relationship, because if you don't, she's going to get bored.
No. Lol, what left-wing movement was in Turkey that NATO crushed? You had destruction of the last caliphate because of hyper-nationalism law. Who would you consider the left-wing that NATO got rid within Turkey? Any sort of fucking Kurdish socialist movement, any sort of working-class movement was completely gutted by ultra-nationalist Nazi fucking Turkish freaks that are now in the governing coalition. What the fuck do you mean the caliphate? Hello? Why did Turkey play an important role in the Cold War against the USSR? I'm personally anti-NATO, but what are your thoughts on the approval rating of NATO being very high in countries on Russia's doorstep? Is 90% in Poland? Can't they just say the same? That like your anti-NATO sentiments are made from the comfort of your own home and away from the reaches of Russia? Yeah, of course they can say that. But I'm also saying that from the perspective of a person who also lived in a NATO country and understands its history, understands NATO's involvement in Turkish affairs. So it would be akin to talking to, I guess, like a Polish socialist or a Polish communist, I don't know, who might have a different perspective on NATO. I'm not saying that my perspective on NATO is commonly held by Turkish people, even though I think that Turkey is less fond of America than maybe Poland is. But there was a time in history where a lot of leftist European leaders were not exactly fond of NATO. Anti-NATO sentiment is really rare in Turkey, even for anti-US sentiments. Yeah, people will be anti-US, but then they'll be pro-NATO. Yeah, İncirlik and its effects on Turkish politics. Yep. Never forget, whenever Turkey does some shit, everyone's always like, whoa, that's crazy. I can't believe they're going against American imperialism. It's like they have nukes. We in Turkey have American nukes in a Turkish-American base. Okay? We have nukes. We have American nukes that we house in Turkey. Whenever people forget that reality and think like, Turkey's doing this, Turkey's doing that, they're going to be fucking they're really showing everybody what's what. It's like, there isn't like a pro-NATO attitude in Turkey because they just like don't even understand what NATO is. However, the anti-NATO coalition is even smaller than the people who would be like pro-NATO.
It's very true, man. And she's either going to leave or she will instill the drama, which gives her control.
Then you're seeing all these Fresh and Fit podcasts and Sneeko and all this crazy shit. And you're seeing like people making their entire livings.
The fall of the Ottoman Caliphate was worse for the world than 1989 sabotage of the USSR. This is the take I just came up with right now, listening for the last 3 minutes. Okay, first of all, you cooked. Okay? You cooked. And no notes. No notes on that. Okay, no notes. 1453, best year of my life. 1453. I'm kidding. Please don't take this seriously. People are going to clip this and be like, he's a fucking neo-Ottomanist. Yeah, sick man of Europe never had the vax. The vaccine for the sick man of Europe was the fucking winged hussars. God, the gates of Austria. My biggest nightmare. It could have been so good. Oh, what could have happened? Oh, just not modernizing the military. So many mistakes. So fucking close. Muslim extremist wants to install a caliphate in America. Yeah, it's so funny because like the Ottoman understanding of Islam and its like maintenance of the caliphate is ironically directly at odds with like Wahhabi movements and the Salafists that you see that America both arms and radicalizes on a regular fucking frequency and was known for its tolerance in comparison to its European counterparts at the same time. European empire and their centuries of colonialization was marked with far worse violence and complete re-education of people's like religions and whatnot and their way of existence, as opposed to the Ottoman Empire at the time. But that is a fun little thing that Western supremacists, Western chauvinists refuse to ever reckon with. And how the fuck did we get here is the real question. Oh my God. Yeah. It's no different than when people say it's no different than when people say that anti-Semitism is like a ancient Muslim thing. It's like, bro, I didn't know the Holocaust was carried out by the Muslims, dude. That's crazy. Like, it's so obviously deflecting away from personal responsibility that like Western nations that don't want to reckon with their horrifyingly violent past is pretty funny.
Complaining about women, and you're like, what the fuck is this? And there was one bruh who would go on these shows, and his name was Destiny.
Women fare a lot better post-divorce than men do, bro. And the reason why is because they get the resource, they get the money, they get the children, they get put in a better situation financially.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
Dude, they get the house. Moms don't live good on child support. That's not true. What? Have you ever seen a bitch on child support? She's not living the greatest fucking life.
Women fare worse than men in almost every degree after divorces. So the idea of pretending...
What are you talking about?
They make more money. They have better dating strategies afterwards. Men just do...
How'd this man go from Owen Jones to Destiny, bro? Like an actually well-read left-wing journalist in the UK who's like written entire books to like guy who talks fast and dunks on some of the dumbest people. And like, I don't agree with everything that Owen Jones has done, obviously, but I still appreciate his voice, especially in the piranha pool that is British media.
Do better than women in almost every single metric post-divorce.
What, bro?
Destiny was really interesting because he was a lefty and he was proud to be a lefty. He didn't try and hide. He didn't say it was like a...
I think this interview in and of itself this interview itself shows that he's not a lefty. I say interview because it was supposed to be a debate and then they just agreed on most positions. So much so that even Lex Friedman was like, wow, you guys agree on you surely agree on a lot.
Centrist. He was like, no,
do you not agree with Owen Jones? I think he was harsh on Jeremy Corbyn. He also was like seemingly on the fuck Jeremy Corbyn. He's anti-Semitic train a little bit. He's had a couple different moments. I think he's evolved from those positions, but you know, he has some of those L's. We all have our own L's, you know, it happens.
Damn, this guy's good.